And you see that the philosophy was, in a logical sense, a fool for love. No matter how brilliant you were in the world or what face you had in the world, that there was an aspect of you that was a fool. It didn't mean stupid for love, but sometimes it did mean, and because then it meant that there was a space in you that was reached in certain relationships or touched in it. And there was always a naive element to it. But that naive is considered in the world a schmuck element. Because then you see that somehow you have a relationship to memory. That the form that you were in was not so, anyone could have told you this is wacky, but you see there was an experience waiting.
Yeah.
And so somehow throughout the passage of your life, not the literalness of time, but the passage, you see that there is a kind of, you were going to have this experience no matter what, that you would have snuck out the window. Just like in the use of early drugs was, where you had a private life going and a private experience, but you saw that there was something in the world that you were in, but that you were also full for love. And that there was a broken heart inherent in the story. And so somehow you had an attraction to the broken heart.
Yeah.
And so that no matter, it was the perfect person for the broken heart, the worst person for the sadhana or whatever. But it was well planned.
My first husband. Oh,
Well, it was well planned to fill your karma and dharma at the same time, for you to be an actor who assumes the roles around the feeling, and yet for you to be true to the literalness. When the literalness of the trucks hit, it's a creative act to be able to be with something, because all the forces then are blaming you for not being in their kind of world. Their workaday world, their literal world, their what you should do world. When you know that inside it's not true. So that's what we were kind of conveying with this young fellow today about the military experience, and then it's PTSD you had to go through in order to come back to life. And so the pot exploration has allowed you. So I say, can you see what's happening? And can you see the passage? So the PTSD, to some extent, has been managing this duality for you.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's kind of holding back something that you're avoiding seeing while you're in it. And so then in seeing it, time has changed for you in some way. You come back. So you have a literal you and a literal in Pennsylvania, a literal me in Santa Fe. And I say, but it has somehow an evocative relationship. If in my mind's eye, I'm in a situation where there's 3 black dogs barking and this is happening in the middle of a desert somewhere, the very romantic thing is the corny thing. So still there seems to be something in the, as I said, hey baby, but meaning somehow an invitation to hang out that is different from, it's a different kind of health. And it's more kind of related that there are certain experiences in the circumstance. And so you come to terms with your own body in a way as if it would be a marriage in some way, that there's no secrets. Somehow you have a way of speaking. So I've been exploring that. And so I felt that that's what he was doing with the growing of pot. It still hadn't become something yet for him. It was that he really threw himself into different mixtures as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said, when I had the recurrence of the cancer, then I took this, I told you this, it was then thought as homeopathic. For 6 weeks, I took a reduced tuberculosis in my body over a 6-week period. And supposedly that awoke the immune system, where usually that situation, the symptoms are really too far gone before the body hide. What is this? Look at two characters over here. Look at, this is a commercial.
This is a
They must be
commercial.
selling something, Tide. They must be selling Tide or something.
Oh,
Really is
Double
beautiful.
beautiful.
You okay?
I'm good, thanks, Dan.
Okay, let's say, I say, look, we have a role for you. You die today and you come back as men. So she got his stash.
Yeah,
said,
she's got
A
some-
little bit,
some
but the
stash.
way
Now
she's got
come
it
back and
figured, she's got a grid going. And I said, I'll give it a shot. But I come back as me, doing men.
You can do it, Danny. Yeah, you could.
Well, we'll see. Not with two Martins in the same space.
We'll be keeping an eye out.
Although you're agreeable Martins.
I know, it's a lot to handle.
There's cooperating Martins and there's competing Martins.
Competitive, Martin.
Now, when you see your own family, you have cooperative Martins and competing Martins.
There's always
Competing
a
Martins
mix.
are pretty lame.
Yeah.
Cooperative Martins have to be shaken and have tragedy happen before they become cooperative full Martins.
That's for sure. It takes a
So,
knockout.
do you want to do Martin?
I
I see.
got the knockout punch, so.
I say to come back as a Martin would be a holy shit experience for me.
You ought to
With a
try
straight,
sometime.
with a straight face, with a straight face.
Well, you might not
I
do
believe one day you'll see that you've had a holy shit experience.
that. More than one.
See you later. Take care. So that was Mary and her sister,
Yeah, they're so cute.
who has kind of lived out here for a period and had a kind of change of life happen. But somehow, even though it may have been tragic in the plans, it seemed to be in the dreams of these two sisters interacting with each other, that she dreamed her way into a close situation with Mary.
Yeah.
And then when the situation she was in wasn't necessary any longer, that she had the relationship with Mary after having a tragedy of her daughter passing and her life being interrupted then, the literal one. Then instantly there was a life here and an expression here like that out of nowhere. Not because you had a college degree or because you, but just, so you see, from my perspective, I see more of this kind of creative magic of a situation that is normal. But when you look at it and you say, holy shit, you can see the theater of the circumstance. And you see the broken heart running through the story. And the management of the broken heart. And is broken heart literal? Well, there are some medical experiments that can show you the literal broken heart and what it looks like and what's taking place. And I did study that years ago. In fact, I used that as a name for a password name. A token. Let's see if I remember. Do you remember what it was, Urja? The description of the broken heart, where it was literal, where you could see in the person that they had a broken heart.
It's a Japanese word.
Tomodori or something like that. I'll find out again about it.
Tako Subo.
what was it again?
Taco Suba.
Ironically, that's my password. The Taco Suba. And it was then the study of you see that the body was participating in the experience with you. And you started to become aware of just awareness and shed light on certain aspects of the life. But you started to see that certain attempts were to take away the life from its history into more of a mystery. That you saw that instead of a literal background, you've had a series of 1 million accidents take place. And at the same time that you've come out of supposedly a literal mother and a father, for these mothers and fathers to have met each other and to have produced a child and to have gone through that is to have, if you've had the genetic thread of it, if you followed the history of you from any other place than the literal history, you would see a composite of experiences that would look like magical thinking, wishful thinking, all the things that we kid around. And you see that early science was magical thinking. That somehow, to us, they intuited something that we also do also. And you see that sometimes they incorporated in God systems. And there's self-treatment and a self-dialogue and a self-conversation where one meets the thing that they took for granted from a different place. And that's like reading a diary or something like that and having a holy shit experience where you say you've been with this person all this time and you didn't know this.
Mm.
You knew it and you didn't know it, but somehow you discovered it. And all of a sudden, discovery was different than knowing. Knowing allowed you to continue. Discovery interrupted the continuity. Where the continuity wasn't the important thing any longer. You saw that there was a surrender of the self over time towards a kind of continuity. But then an act reveals something that interrupts time like that, where you're free. The compelling elements. So this fellow was asking, and I say, if you continue with PTSD as being the reason that you have to overcome, then you're going to raise your kids with fear. The same kind of fear that you're coming out of. So I say, so the kids then become your possessive. And he was kidding around to one extent. He says, well, one kid was becoming like in the army with him.
Mm.
So then I say, okay, but so basically you've come back to make sure that they're free to find a life.
Mm.
And so the PTSD, getting rid of the PTSD as if you're punishing it, as if it was the wrong thing, when in fact it told you what happened. And if you don't need it anymore, you don't need it anymore. I don't know if you need to get rid of it, but there may be lag time in the body. I have experiences sometimes where once the perception is there, the freedom also comes right there in the same moment. There's no fear. Somehow, perception, that fear allowed something to continue. But the perception was no longer based on continuity. It was based on a kind of truth. So then you saw there was a difference between karma and dharma. Where an incident happens that forces what in fact has been avoided on an honest conversation or heartfelt conversation or conversation or it has different elements of it. The heartfelt usually is the problem with heartfelt for most of us is it has to be true. So it's usually when everything collapses that the person then may be coming from that place. So then I say, okay, variations from that. I said, because the broken heart was always in the story and it was always being managed and juggled. So there was always going to be a moment. And what was the moment in the broken heart? Is that it couldn't be a broken heart unless there was a true feeling that ran through it. It couldn't have all the other elements of it unless there was a true feeling in it. And somehow you've made a life around the true feeling. And sometimes in it, you'll be a poor thing stuck in a circumstance. And other times you'll be a saint. Let me see. Roger, do you want to be Mary Magdalene? But you wouldn't mind playing it in the movie.
Right.
Okay.
Doubled.
Let's say we're talking about the movie of the spirituality, where you're you, and you're assuming a certain experiential role, that somehow in assuming the role, you do have part of the experience. So then you had an experience of what it meant to be a schmucky young woman in love with this guy who's going to be the savior. And he's got all these other guys hanging around, and they're all hanging around together. And the mothers are complaining, and they're all single wives. And he keeps on saying that God wants him to do this. And Judas, who seems like he's making a buck out of it, keeps on being the instigator. So let's say you're in a dumb story that turns out a century later not to be a dumb story. It turns out to be a holy story. But you're in it is a pretty weird story that you're in. And you're Mary Magdalene, who just wants this boyfriend, who just likes this boyfriend. Jesus, stop. So he gets a job because you want him to get a job, and he makes the schmuck makes crucifixes
Yes.
as a woodworker for his job. So he's still, no matter what he does, he's got this thing that he's going to do. And you would just like to have a boyfriend, but in order to have the boyfriend, you would have to respect his calling. And if you respected his calling, then you would see that boyfriend didn't mean literally boyfriend or girlfriend. It meant experiential, that there was a bunch of experiences that were kind of naively hidden in the body, in the brain, opened up doors, closed doors, assumed identities not so much based on credentials or what university you graduated from or what you were from, but that you had instant existence. And that somehow we were just kidding around with Segue, that he had such a juggling act in his body that he assumes, like he walks in the room, almost running in the room, and he's like telling people what to do or what's going on or whatever. And so you could see, that, so he assumes identities, and he acts like if he walked in with scientists, he would assume scientific information and stuff, that he assumes the identity, but the strength of it, but only if it's released into, now we go into another phase where you see it, where it's not driven by sugar and background and fathers and molecules in the body and the brain, where it's laid back or it's active. But we just had a remarkable conversation today with these young guys around the pot, and then Seth and Segway and Brenda and Janet being there and just having a conversation. this seeing the identity as an assumption. And you see that it's driven. But you also see it's always missing, all of life is missing a hey baby conversation. And that has to be a true conversation somehow. It smells phoniness. It sees it trying to get there, but it kind of somehow, because it's not a loss of the love then, it is an understanding that the form changes. Okay. And it shifts to dreams and memories and circumstance. As it literalizes, it clashes. So then you see, to some extent, much of the relationships we've had have dream elements to them in memory. And that the memories are coexisting. They're not somewhere a treasure chest of some past things, but that you stumble upon something that's there, that's existing in the moment, and yet it's reflective of time in a different situation. And so you have accidental contact with processes that are happening in you all the time. In the normalcy. And it starts to reflect the level of normalcy that one has is a remarkable creative act. If one stepped into that story from a clear space. So I say, okay, let me play an 81-year-old French woman in Boulder, Colorado, who's had the plague and the shots and has gone through some losses with family and circumstance, but somehow is in, and the voice says, Boulder, Colorado, the angel says. I said, yeah, but you're going to be 81 years old and your neck is going to hurt. He says, I'll do it. I'll try it. Let me see. Do you know how many years of meditation it would take for you to be just that dopey person who would jump into your body just to have as much time as left there to have the experience? So let's say an angel would love to watch Netflix for another year. Okay. And I say, okay, we'll give you Urja's body and you go watch Netflix for a year. Would you make the deal, Urja? And you would say, okay, but can you help me with my neck? Well, the angel says, look, when I'm inside of you, it'll be my neck also. So how dumb that is. Then how dumb is it for me to think that I am Urja, this little French girl from 100 years ago, who went through this whole weird story, and I'm in Boulder, Colorado. How weird is that? That should sell 2 million copies. How the hell did you pull that off? Did you use a mantra or something? So somehow there has been some relationship to an energy. And even though it may have seemed stupid that you were attracted to this, run away to Rajneesh or make a life there, or the larger picture may think of you as this or that, you see the brilliance of the moves of stepping out of the status quo or shifting the status quo. And somehow it was always there, but that somehow gave you freedom to act. And it may have been a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or somehow a boyfriend saying, hey, how you doing, baby? Allows you to be a how you doing, baby. And so you see the mistakes and the accidents are not exactly mistakes and accidents. If you had to write them in, you would have to be brilliant. If you had to write your life, it would require a brilliant honesty that would allow you also to see the weirdness without schmaltzing it too much, the artwork that your life has been. And not only to you, the manager, but that's why I'm saying the immune system, this and that, where you saw the management as instinct. And you then also see not only the literal existence, but you also see the perceptively the creative existence, where you can go out there now and say, yeah, I'm from France and I lived in Paris and ooh la la, and
I just have to open my mouth. I'm classified.
what do you say then, Derek? Would you like to do ooh la la?
Try that on for a few minutes, maybe.
Yeah, well, how about you're no longer a driver of Uber?
No.
Did you have an opening statement when you did it? Hi, I'm Derek, and I'm here to take you to the airport or something like that.
No, just sort of, how's it going?
How's it going? No, that's okay. That must be. You didn't have to say how much or where is or.
No, the
Everything
technology
should be
takes
done.
care of all that for you.
So it's all spelled out for you.
Mm.
So is that conversation or is that allowed?
At first there was, yeah, when it was early on, it was very friendly. And then it ended up being, some people like to talk, but most people just didn't want to talk to you. So they put on headphones or that kind of thing. So it ended up being very dissociated, if that's the word.
And how is it now? Your teaching, is it more connected for you? Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, that is not a bad way to earn a buck if you need a buck. Is that you have the car and somehow there's a whole system and you drive. And so it has the matrix element to it. And as we were discussing last week, the artificiality, it seems, is becoming the normalcy. So that supposedly once you, the problem with us would be running into an artificial situation as life, but then those coming from it, we're attempting to protect them by still giving them closeness, giving them a kiss or a bounce or an argument or a fight, or but something where there's a tangible reality. But in fact, the reality is that our reality is becoming fiction to that reality or history. So you'll be described as you'll be described. How will you be described then, Kai?
Cool. I don't think I want to know.
I meet one of these characters or whatever, and they say, I really love that gal, let me tell you. And she broke my heart there. So they all blame you for.
I think I have a long string of she broke my heart.
So all of these guys would protect themselves by blaming you, not because that they were, okay, that they lamed out or they had to be.
Right.
Not that they say, it had to be true with her in some way. And once she woke up to that, then it was therapy.
Yeah.
Then she was hanging out with you because she felt sorry for you, not because but for your lover, you don't feel sorry for. But for your work in the world, you do kind of feel sorry for. And you see it's the broken heart that you're feeling sorry for, the loneliness. It looks like loneliness, but the longing inside the story. So let's say somehow you made a relationship to that longing.
That feels very accurate.
And then once it realizes or relates, so you have to structure it or so loneliness is maybe a way of finding something, but it's not a way of continuing something. So when loneliness becomes its own thing, it seeks to continue. So it brings lonely into the story. But when it falls in with a kind of true love, it surrenders the loneliness as no longer being necessary. The loneliness was just to keep you honest.
Mm.
So then you see a dual world being lived. The loneliness which seemed a torment that you had to act on was in fact a protective for the journey in some way. You have a relationship with an experience. So you see you, and you see the body also. You get a glimpse where the body is caring for a process that you're in. And the end is to have the whole experience of your life. Hmm? And you become aware that somehow as you're still subject to the literalness, so we can play with each other with urgency. We have a year to play with, or this or that. But then a year is more creative time. It can be 10 years, 5 years, no years. That's the script that's written for you. Have you read the script that's written for you? Take a look at page 81. What does it say for you to expect? Is it a good year for you, the 81?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm asking you. I'm opening up to page 81 of the book that you have there, a version. So what does 81 look like for you?
I have complete freedom to be. There is no schedule, there is nothing, and it's not. I have to say sometimes it's not easy to handle such freedom.
Look, Ursha, if I was you, then I would say, what would be my big job this year is to look cute.
No.
So I think that everything that you're doing, if someone knocks on your door and you open your door, you're going to look cute. When you come on, you look cute. So let's say your life's work has been to look cute no matter what happens. Somehow you look. And so you're doing okay with cute.
Well.
So if you pass away, you'll have a cute look. If you live a bit longer, you'll have a cute look. Now, I don't mean cute to minimizing your life to cute. But I'm saying to you, you do look cute. And you are acting cute. And I say, I see that cute means that you're managing something. But if someone knocks on the door, you don't let them say, holy shit, you know how my neck is? That you make believe that your neck is good, everything is good, how's everything going? Like that. So let's say your neck is your baby that's crying. So you may yell at it, but when someone knocks on the door, you say, oh no, it's okay. So let's say you are managing without knowing literally the management, but that you're managing. And you're managing also in a circumstance that gives up here and compensates for itself by leaning over this way or doing this way. So you see a remarkable process taking place where your body is managing life, but it's lived a life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hanging out if you want to do it.
Yes.
And wanting to do it is no longer left to the ego about wanting to do it and not wanting to do it or its belief systems, but is more of a vote in its own body and its own being, its own thought processes. And a conversation with itself that doesn't, it may be hanging out on the couch. And reflecting on things that don't have a literal answer or whatever, but are coming from But when you do have some of the situation of living while you're dying, and somehow the perception of that allows you an elective sensibility in it. And so you see the difference between a suicide and a dying when it's finished, when something is complete. And so that there was a reading a report where there was a rebellion against it being called doctor-assisted suicide, because it didn't want the doctor to own the story, that they're only part of the story, and that there was an intelligent dignity in dying. And that it did probably come in one sense in hanging out and saying, okay, how you feeling? And what's up? Or, but somehow a conversation with one's own existence.
Yes.
That was not hidden. It didn't, but when it's hidden, it captures you.
Cool.
Yeah, in other words, when the story is suppressed, it then captures the situation. Okay. So in the social structure, the concept is to live as long as possible and then to, okay. But then as you explore it, you start to find a world that who's making that up is those who are profiting from you living as long as possible. You understand? Because of what they'll sell you and what you'll buy and how you live. So you start to find a world that's being organized that at the same time that it's being organized for you, it's artificializing it. And so it's not a feel good. You then see that somehow there's an authentic experience of your life. And when you see that, in fact, the things that you went through and didn't go through, not reactive or disreactive, but you see the authenticity of your own existence. When you see the authenticity, it's then it becomes second nature to you now to resist the selling out of something.
Yeah.
So then when the issue comes your way, should I sell out? Should I not sell out? Should I do? You see that challenge has always been in there. So let's say we have a glimpse of that conversation going on in our bodies, in our beings, in our circumstance. And that somehow our circumstance without that feeling in it would be pretty weird. But it's normalized that you should somehow be in Boulder, Colorado, contemplating the void.
Really.
They say, what was the philosophy that got you there? And you see kind of darshan yoga or just conversational or spin-offs of conversations or looking at things, but hanging out in some way allowed an immersive element to take place. That sort of shifted time from the literal workaday world to more seeing time from a creative space, as if you were a writer or musician, where you would work for a week and be off for 2 weeks, where somehow the immersion in the environment was essential to the work you were doing. So it couldn't be organized as a job. Our life became our work in some with this we did take some pictures of my doing this exercises with the
Oh, you
shadow,
did?
but the main purpose that I was trying to show was once I started to do it with the shadow, it started to become something else. It was like another dimension of the experience,
Mhm.
you know. And so then you saw different moves that came out of the shadow that I tried to capture against the wall with the sunshine there. So, but we do have, she did get 7 minutes of a regular exercise with it. That may be helpful, but it's, and we just did it here with Seth and the others, but we'll see if we get the shadow exercise moving, because once the shadow was included, you kind of surrendered to what was happening with the shadow, and its movements were completely, you were free form, you were, you know, so it's very interesting. So I'm still experimenting with that. So I think that if folks do that, it kind of leads you into other forms and other exercises or whatever. You know, now there's also the one club movements like a mace there, Derek. But it's not bad to do a couple of times a day, I think. What do you think? Well, you don't do it much.
I haven't been, I was kind of out of it for a couple of weeks after the vaccine, and then more just this week I picked it back up, but I haven't thought about twice, but I could try that out, once in the evening, once in the morning.
You were out of it after the second shot?
Well, I only got the one shot, actually, the Johnson & Johnson, but I don't know, I just wasn't back to normal until probably like this week. So.
Well, I think Spiro was really thrown, his body was thrown for a loop. And he's pretty healthy in terms of yogic health, you know, and well, you would presume. And then Segway was thrown for a loop with the second shot there. But then you also see that if you throw the vaccine on somebody whose body is already struggling with something, then I would say, holy shit, what are you kidding me? You know, the shit this guy is eating and the stuff that he's doing, and he's up all night, and I'm keeping this whole damn thing together, and now you're going to throw a vaccine on me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then you kind of make it into a dumb, humanizing conversation where you know somehow your body is dealing with stuff. And it's not just like literal machinery, but it's your body. And it's been along for the ride. So let's say events happen where you meet something without overschmaltzing it, where you genuinely meet something that it needs your attention. And it's a bit like a conversation that someone may have with you where they say, hey, your kid needs your attention in something. And even though you're sure about this or that, you may also have to have. We were kidding around with this veteran then with the kid, when he said, if you turn your kid into a private that has to salute you and this and that, then he must, at the same time he's saying, yeah, Dad, I salute you. He must be telling his friends, well, the creepy one, the jumpy, he makes me salute him in the morning, and he'll be blaming you for the very shit. Okay, that somehow it has to come, caring for something means caring for, that the person is kind of born free without too much of a trip laid on them. That they're free to find their voice, free to find it. And freedom doesn't mean licensed behavior, it means coming from a place. So do you feel that much of what we've shared, Derek, has come to you, that you see that way to some degree?
Yeah, definitely.
And yet it's not, and do you feel that some of what we've shared is that you see in the world from that kind of lens also? Erja. And yet it doesn't seem to have rules to it, or even It may have logic to it, but it does seem in the shared experience where the person then goes out and does their thing, but is coming from a different place, where somehow they've attempted to make their life into their work. Where work didn't mean toil in that way. If toil was necessary, fine, but it didn't mean toil to sublimate your brain, to sublimate your being towards toil. But as a matter of fact, it meant consciousness, that your work was your life, your breathing, your eating, your sharing, your interaction was your work. And that it's a whole. And yet then becomes literal work, and that somehow creates divisions with other forms of you, where there may need to be 10 yous with 10 different roles and 10 different shapes and 10 different expressions simultaneously. What a management job. How are you doing with it, Guy?
Well, I hope I'm not having to manage it. You know, I was going to bring up that, so I had a dream last night about my first husband, who was obviously a very karmic relationship. So it was just a sweet dream, and he just kind of had his leg on me and I was holding his leg. And so when a relationship is done being karmic, can it become dharmic in the memory of it?
Let's say they're both, as it's happening, a memory of it is being produced simultaneously. So in one sense, that's the memory of it that is more your life than the experience. So let's say that memory as you, that you in fact are literally a structure of memories. And that there are corresponding memories out there. You see alternative existence, not only the literal existence, but you see accidental meetings, situations. In fact, it usually has to be accidental. It can't have too much motive. And so you see then that has been a thread that has run through the line, that there's a conversation going on. And that kind of conversation has a dialogue with the outer world, where there's a look, a hearing, an experience that all of a sudden, without too much background or whether it becomes a friendship or an intimacy, in a month or a day or a week that would have taken 50 years or 20 years or something like that. Okay. So, or maybe even sitting on a bench and meeting someone in a space where there's more share than you can share with most of the people you may know. So you see that there is this dialogue going on all the time. And that you've ensured that some element of that lives on in the children, whatever happens. And that somehow, even though you've had to visit every aspect of the experience, and you see the pressure on you to feel grief, but you understand that somehow you've created an existence that has the whole experience of being a person over nothing. If the kid said something wrong to you, crepe you, moved by, holy shit, you would be sent to purgatory in a minute, you understand? And you would feel then what people say when they say, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my fault. Okay, That's purgatory, is when a person says, it wasn't my fault, and I've been forced to say, it was your fault, you bastard. And I say, look, I don't know. Okay. So let's say you see the person is trying to protect their soul or their brain or their being or their life or some of their memory. And you visit that place, but you're not of it. And so you kind of had visited the situation where you have seen the weakness, the strength, the face, the heart, the loss, the karma, the dharma of situations. And for a moment, there was enough of a feeling where it was true. So it was true enough for there to be an experience waiting for you. And somehow you visited the broken heart as an existence, as a way of being, that it was inherently in the story. But the broken heart was not such a fault to be avoided. The broken heart was because there was a yearning for it to be true. And so you saw that there was, whatever you were experiencing in the world, there was another dimension of you that was still a kind of virgin in it. So that one was the carrier of that innocence.
Mm.
So you then see the flaws in the experience were not exactly flaws. That to a large degree you've had a creative life that has more mystery in it, but somehow you also shifted from your history or from repetition in some way. Although you may meet your mother in a secret way, it's not the mother that would have let you be you, but it may be the mother that was you. So let's say, then you don't do your mother with the kids now, where somehow you are an angel, okay? But then somehow you're going to be a mother who says, hey, you better not do this, or you better not do that. So you understand the act you would have to put on, where if they said to you, come on, Mom, that's not you, stop the crap with that, you better not do. We're free to figure out what the hell to do and talk to you about it. And you say, holy shit, I don't know if I can do this one. And you may not have to. But basically, you're still into it? Kai?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question when you ask me that.
Well, it's not literalized so much, but basically it is like you're going on stage every night.
Hmm.
And you understand that sometimes it's a drag after a year of doing it or something like that. But then you also see it's a career move. It is what you're doing. You're really into it. But you may be tired or you may need a shift in thinking or a circumstance.
Yeah, I need a shift in circumstance. I'm passionately into my life, but I feel like it's rising into a different physical reality.
So I think then you're acquainting yourself with processes that are happening in you. So it's not you having to decide so much. The confusion happens to have intelligence in it, because it is between circumstance. So it's not to get rid of the confusion. It is to understand that the confusion is just like, should you get the shot or shouldn't you get the shot? The confusion is not stupidity. The confusion is an intelligent conversation that's going on in your brain and your body and the circumstance, because you see the scams and you see the trips and you see this, and you saw fear and so there's a brilliant thing going on, just like your blood circulation and breathing, that's weighing the world. And it's measuring to what extent is it involved in the literal world. And okay. So it is juggling itself. And that looks like confusion in the literal world that you have to get rid of, but confusion is intelligence. Because it can't act unless it sees something. So the confusion is caring for something that it has to speak to it in a way. Okay. So I'm not talking about getting rid of the confusion. I'm talking about, in fact, thanking yourself for the confusion about something, because it's kind of, you would be forced to do this or that. And
That's
to
true.
make a stand about something where it's not a stand. It doesn't
Right.
speak to me in a way. And so I feel that the confusion is, once you explore it, it then shows you that it's not really confusion, it's coming from a certain place. That somehow it has to include a grace. Whatever, whether it's not the doer or the not doer. The doer and the not doer is the same character if it's coming from doing and not doing. It's coming from the grace of a situation where your life now is around the grace of something. And you're caring for it. So there's a different kind of truth in it than literal truth. Because when it's coming from a kind of grace in you, then events are shifting all the time. So that's what we were talking about with the PTSD. Can you perceive so deeply that it's finished?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to work your way out of it and this and that. And I say, well, sometimes there's lag time in the body because the body was also trained to make things normal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it was trained to be able to strangle a guy normally, and that was a normal thing to do. Okay. So the memory may be there, but I'm saying that I've had experiences where, and seeing something, there was no lag time in the body, that somehow the body also saw. And then sometimes you see the body was making its adjustment to the experience.
Mm.
Now you also see that that happens if there's an ending of a relationship or something like that. The body, the brain, everything is making an adjustment to an experience that it's had that was normal for it, that it got used to a relationship being in the story. And so it proceeded as if that was normal.
Yeah.
And then when it shifts, it then experiences something that was hidden in it in some way. So let's say you visit your own life, and it's not your own life. It's your life to care for. And you see that there are elements in the life that gave you actually an existence, that you've assumed identities around it, but that somehow the life has been a journey for you. And you see the elements of the journey have been relationships, screw ups in relationships, and this and that open up other doorways, other experiences. But you also see in the experiences that you were choosing, somehow you changed the literal relationship to your history. That somehow you were meeting people, having experiences where you didn't really come from this state or that state or this experience or whatever, but there were people meeting and sharing. And in the sharing, it normalized the life. And it normalized not having a job literally at times, and it normalized this, but you saw that the keeping it together was a creative act itself. And jobs may have been part of it. But you weren't committed to the job was committed to your freedom in some way. That you selected jobs that kind of allowed you to be free, not that you had to be devoted to the job.
Mm-hmm.
So then you started to see elements of a historical slavery where you need this to continue. And then you start to see whole industries. I was reading about how the food is so manufactured that it's not even food, but you need it, that it kicks off elements in your brain and your body where you need it. So, and they say, well, what about the conflict that comes? And they say, the conflict is good. You want a customer who's in conflict. And so they say, oh, is it this all organized into trips? So you see, to some degree, we've created a lifestyle, a life situation, a way of earning in that world, but so that we can live in a kind of freedom, creative freedom.
Mhm.
And so to some extent, it's called being in it, but not of it. It's somehow your life as a creation, your life as a creative act. And the factor that's in the way of the perception of the creative act is the owner of the act, the you. So his first primary thing was to survive.
Yeah.
But the secondary element was at the expense of survival, it surrendered its grace. So at that point, you see that there's a yearning then for the grace that awakens in the circumstance. And grace is the experience of somehow being simply human, dopey thing that even in watching the so-called Netflix version, you see you get a laugh at or a cry at or a scare at, and an absorption in the story is an absorption in the story. Somehow we are negotiating time and space. Is anyone else on here, or is this the four of us?
Anybody on YouTube? We have Magic Soupy. That's 6 people are watching. So if anybody wants to say hi on the chat, go ahead.
Okay. But let's presume that we've had a momentary experience where you see the thread of the life, the creative aspects of the life that will be remembered by someone who loved you or cared for you or hated you or felt it. In reflection, in the absence, you'll see that there's still a you in it. As there are yous that you have in your own experience that have passed on in form or whatever, and an accidental seeing something may kick that off, and you see that it's happening in the moment, not some past experience or whatever, but the past is in the present. And let's say if you're in a situation where you get to experience the dimensions that you've experienced in life, not just the historical literalness of it. When the story is released from its historical mandate, you see how someone from 30 years ago would have been hard to say, hey, how you doing? Because you hurt feelings or this happened. Or,
Right.
you understand? And then an instant happens and says, hey, baby, that flies 30 years later or 20 years later.
That's what I was asking. Can that happen in a dream?
It is happening. The process is happening now. The resistance to it is both creative. So you can't make it. It has to be true, though. That's all. So you are then entering into a phase of creativity where somehow it knows if you're full of shit and you have a motive. So somehow the world can smell you out if you've got a motive. So you're doing pure and you've got to do pure.
Mhm.
Now, pure doesn't mean schmuck or stupid or anything like that, but it does mean pure. And in fact, you have been doing pure. That is, your attraction is pure. That there's no motive. And that it is a true feeling that has allowed you to navigate. And for you, it has been a true feeling that has allowed you to navigate. And once that feeling was interrupted, the form fell apart. So thank God the form fell apart. If the form continued after the thing fell apart, then you're okay. So you've come close to that. But somehow you've been able to keep the energy in the story before it became captured by bullshit. So let's say that, do you want the job?
Don't know how to respond to that.
So
Um,
somehow at the same time, they may advise you to go along with bullshit. Somehow you're related to a true feeling in your life that has kind of given you a life.
mhm.
And it's gotten
Yeah.
you into relationships and it's gotten you out of relationships. And it may have been the same thing that got you into the relationship that got you out of the relationship. But
Yeah.
from its, if you ask it, if I ask that energy inside of you, it thinks it saved your life.
It did save my life.
It thinks that it saved your life by finding it was true while it was true and there was bullshit when it was bullshit.
Yes.
And so somehow arguments happen, this happened, all that happened, which is what happens when it turns to, not that it's bad or to be avoided or to go to a psychiatrist. That's the form that you see that there's a mirror reflect that's showing you that it's missing the hey baby in one sense, that the story has become the reality and the feeling has diminished
Yeah.
to a literal job. So you can do it 10 years on stage, but you can't do it 10 years as a literal reality. And I say, why? Because somehow there has to be a hey baby.
Yeah.
So if you sniff around and you look for the hey baby, you find babies.
Mhm.
And so your relationship is somehow related to an instant feeling that will be there with you of you in the memory. Boy, this is rather, but then it is in fact not something that's only organized by karma.
It's a beautiful reflection because I just thought that I couldn't stay in relationships, but if I reflect, it's true. It's absolutely true. The minute it starts to get dumb, I'm out.
Well, because there's another aspect of it, and that includes when you come back into the story from that perspective, then you're nothing. You're human somehow. You're a being. You've come back into the story around the experience that you'll have. So you would see it as an energy. You would love to be like, as I was kidding around, the angel would love to do a year of Urja.
Hmm.
You know, and say, yeah, give me a body, give me a life, give me a you. And say, Urja in Boulder, Colorado. I said, and the neck hurts. Is there any money saved? And they say, okay, a couple of $1,000s. I said, okay, I'll take it. So do you think the angel would have a good time as Urja for a year?
I can see that.
So it would come from a different place. So the problems that Urja would have would be delightful if you wanted the experience. You can have the full experience of Urja in 1 year. Okay. So then I say, well, what is it? It just evaporates in air? And I said, it does look like it evaporates. But then if I remember Urja, is it Urja I'm remembering? What do you say?
Are you asking
Let me
me?
see, my last memory of Urja would be Urge is no longer. Now I have a memory of Urge, and I say, so when she fainted over here and the ambulance came and everyone was wondering, I think it was my birthday party or something like that. Yeah. So then I say, do you know that that's what I would remember?
No, I didn't.
Or should I remember something else? I remember that you brought the New York Times in Amsterdam
Oh, Danny.
for me as a gift. You gave me a gift and when we were in Amsterdam, and you then all of a sudden appeared.
It was the wrong date, Danny. I remember that.
Right.
What?
With the
She
New
bought
York
the
Times.
newspaper. They charge you
Okay.
so much for the New York Times, and then they, when she got it, there was the wrong date on it.
And I felt I was completely
Humiliated.
mortified.
She was attempting to show us that she was a college graduate, and then we found out that she was a dopey French woman.
Mhm.
Wouldn't you prefer to be a dopey French woman than a? What do you say?
Yeah.
So without over romanticizing it, it's been a trip.
Yes.
Hmm? And you're happy you got through it?
Well, there is always that what if, it's like it's hard to keep it just as it is.
But not
sometimes.
as the owner of the story, but let's
Okay.
say you're free to pass away now.
Yes.
But you're also free if you come back in the story. Is there anything you'd like to bring about?
Yes.
So that seems to be that you're keeping the relationship with your daughter, who has some kind of mirror reflection life of yours, where she's then willing to try a love relationship in an experimental way, where everyone would say, no, no, don't do it. Are you crazy? Are you kidding these mother chumpers? And yet there is somehow something that comes out of you that explores, that doesn't just have a literal life, but somehow explores relationship, explores love affairs, explores, and inherently you see the hurt cycle. There's not literal hurt, like being imprisoned or being beaten, but it's hurt around kind of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see that it's driven to have the experience. It's not that they could be advised not to have the experience. There is a relationship with that experience that's inherent, that anyone literally can see and most of the world attempts to avoid. But those who are living a creative life have a relationship with a broken heart, where it's not a possessive, but it's an experience that changes the nature of the circumstance that you're in. Because you see, you then are experiencing what everyone is avoiding. And as you experience it, you see it's not literally your broken heart, but there's an inherent broken heart that runs through the systems of life. And so the thing that reveals it, it's not, it thinks it causes it. It thinks that someone left you and it causes it. Someone leaving you reveals it. And that the broken heart was there from the get-go somehow. You may have come out of the broken heart. So you find parallel dimensions of your own existence that are not so much related to your genetic background, your historical background. You see there's an evocative existence also. But your capacity to perceive it is almost when you're not in it and of it any longer. Because it's not around happy days, it's around the whole experience of your life in some way. You get to experience your life in Boulder, Colorado. You want to jump.
I have it.
You have it, but you're not a prisoner of it. You are a volunteer. I think, even though we trapped you into this death doula stuff, it's not exactly a trap in terms of
It's not.
But it may have a larger implication about dignity and dying and stuff like that, or
Yes.
recognizing dying as, in fact, just as much a state as living is. What do you say, Derek? That dying has its validity just like living has its validity,
Seems to.
and that but it has it anyway. Whatever the world does with it or whatever, that has its own elements. What do you say? Is it hurting too much though? Urja?
You mean physically or?
Yeah, physically.
I really, lately it has been rather easy to manage in a way. I
Oh,
just
okay.
that, but 4 o'clock, I'm exhausted. But morning are wonderful. I'm full of life and physically.
Well, you imagine your thyroid gland doing all this work,
Yes,
and you understand that basically when it's slowed down into a hypo, then it's not sending out energy to all the parts of the body. It's only protecting the
yes,
part of the body that watches Netflix. It's surrendering the nose, the knees, the toes. And the thyroid is heavy. You can see it shoveling coal into the situation. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you still have movability.
yes.
You can still exercise and do dance and stuff like that.
And Netflix, I thought I was finished with it because I couldn't find anything. And then I found Feel Good, and I found it exquisite. I don't want to, I don't know if you have seen it, but just my
What is it
talking
called?
about, I got goosebumps. It's so real and full of life and passionate. The people, the stories.
What
and
is it called? What is it called?
Feel good. Feel good.
Feel good.
Feel good.
It's especially it's around 2 women, but I won't say anymore because it's
On
just-
Netflix.
yes, it's really remarkable. I mean, it was refreshing.
Did you watch the series about the boy with the horns?
I'm watching it and I stopped watching it for a bit.
What was the name of that again?
But he's adorable.
Sweet Tooth. Here's
He's
Mary.
adorable. I'm here.
So Sweet Tooth.
Yes.
Well, Derek, you've been quiet throughout the time. Anything at all? Or we just our chat, our kind of supernatural chat
Hanging out.
where spirituality and literal reality are all intertwined.
Yeah.
And so you see magical thinking, creative thinking, logical thinking, all being aspects, all being colors, all being expressions available. And to some extent, you see that your life has been your work and you become acquainted with it in some way. And you see that somehow you found a way to navigate through the life without too much planning. Most of it seeming to be accidental, but having to do with relationship in some way, or spin-offs of relationship. So somehow what is happening between us is simply illuminating what is happening, not adding to it. The illumination of it, to some extent, adds a dimension. But in order for it to be illuminated and seen, something has to also correspondingly awaken in the person, where they then come back into the story from that space. That they're caring for something in themselves and they're negotiating with the world. But the thing that most we're caring about, the survival element, is only an aspect of it. You see that you're caring for a creative dimension of your existence. So we experience to some degree that without, again, over polishing, because at that point in time, you understand that the whole experience has somehow what everyone could have told you would happen. You pursue the experience of it. So to some extent, you see the life almost as a quest of the broken heart. They say, why would that, sounds neurotic, why would that happen? They say, no, there's something true. There is a quest for the true, with a true love. And so the broken heart comes in the story because the story is afraid of the broken, is afraid of that truth. One goes through a fire of existence, but the journey has been around, there's an experience waiting in the story.
Mm.
And somehow it's requiring you to be there for it. So then once we get around with Urja, where she's opened the dialogue of dying and living, and doulas and people who are then have woven dying into their living situation without oversticking it and becoming morbid and this and that, a recognition of a fact that's happening, that there is a dialogue that's hidden from you, that you're subject to. But that living is okay with dying in its essence. It's having a conversation. Just like seasons and vegetation, and they're having conversation with each other. Sometimes arguments. And you start to perceive dimensions of your own existence that is not your own existence, but that your own is an aspect of what happened. And you see that somehow you jumped into it for the experience, whether it was logical or not. You may have tried to manage it logically, but you see the illogicalness of it was that there was an experience and a journey in the story. And somehow there is a point of perception where an event happens that asks you, baby, are you still into it? There's an honest, a heartfelt conversation that usually happens in the loss. And I say, why? I say, because somehow when there's a mutual loss together, the love that we experience at one point may come to us. And so you understand that it had to come, somehow the coming to that space relieves the historical premise of the story. And it allows you to see that you were merely a character of an experience. That somehow feelings in you allowed you to create a life. And as they shifted, the life that was literal, as it became literal, it started to disappear or shift when it in fact was a creative act. And that somehow it had to be true. And that's not spelled out. But false was spelled out. Once the feeling started to shift, the form started to dissolve. So then it literalizes in the world. But it's happening, even in science, it's happening. The form is dissolving while it's carrying on. So as the form is dissolving while it's carrying on, then incidents happen that are reflective of a shift. But everything is forcing a hey baby conversation. Even in absence, even in memory, there's a hey baby conversation waiting in memory, where you see it from the other's perspective fully. And there's an I and thou inherently in the story. You want the job version? I'll take it. I'll try it for a year. Shall we try it for a year?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. And Derek, what's been happening for you since you're kind of in a different situation for yourself?
There's definitely a kind of juggling in a way, but something I want to be there for, I think, too, you know. And
But you are choosing the independence of your lifestyle.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm?
yes,
Okay. And
it seems important, that critical even.
no, you see the energy then with John, the question of introducing you to your voice or to your sound, how it's impacted everyone in its own way. It created friendships, relationships, situations, and so basically you see this larger story unfold. An accidental event or this or that, and then you can see the situation you were in at the time. With Naropa, we'll say, in San Francisco. Okay. That
We all
somehow,
came through John. All three of us came.
yeah. And there has been so many hard times with John. First meeting him, I've met him a few times with the woman that were breaking up, and he was breaking, and it was such a, you had to hold his head and say, "How you doing, baby?" So let's say this voice has given one a life. And then it's allowed us to meet. What do you say, Derek? But then it brought its own challenges.
All good challenges in retrospect.
Well, only challenges, for me, it's a movie that I'm seeing, but I see the people in it will have issues. And I say, why? I say, there may be issues just like if you have a band together and you decide to leave the band, does the band owner or the other people think you betrayed them or whatever? So you create a network of experiences within the form. As we'll say, that Kerry just revealed, where caring for someone becomes a job, and then the job, you say, well, you didn't get here on time, and the person is treating it as a job. So you see affection literalizes. And when it literalizes, it starts to demand something that was given to it out of feeling.
Mm,
And somehow that feeling can't be demanded to.
yeah.
That feeling has to be given. So when that feeling is yelled at, it starts to. So it goes through a social experience, but it's not exactly a social experience, is that the thread is lost or shifted. Then the social experience follows it. So it's not a question of correcting. What's happening is really happening. The feeling which gave it a reality is shifted. And then it shifted to the mechanics of something. So there is an argument waiting. The argument is because the feeling is shifted. Not because someone has done something wrong. With the feeling, even doing something wrong, everybody would have laughed at it. But then when the feeling lost, then you doing something wrong, supposedly is, coming from a different place than a joke or just a friend's sharing an experience. So let's say you're moving through where a form that was a creative act becomes a literal act. And so the attention that you brought to the creative act was a feeling. When it's a literal act, it becomes a job, then you start to see the feeling shifts with it. So somehow you've created realities that are not literal realities, but are creative realities. And to some degree, they're based on the ability to communicate. What you say, that there is a process going down for you, that your life is a process, your work is a process that you're in.
Seems the process is perpetual.
But you see process in nature all over. You see process in the fruit that you have. If you let it's processing, it's dying, it's living. Okay, there's a period, so you see that it's in process. So you see that everything's in process at the same time that it's there. So you're seeing a basic science. So you're seeing living and dying in the process. When you look at the apple and it's rotting or something like that over a few days, you start to see a process that's taking place. Now, the process was in the apple already. It needed certain circumstance or time or space for it to manifest that way. So you also see that the person is in process. And even at the story that they're in is a process that they're in of time and space deeply as an immersive. So the immersive becomes a reality. Even though it wouldn't be a reality to someone who knocked on the door and visited for a moment, they would leave you what you have presumed is to be a reality. So those you're sharing it with see it as a reality also. But those who may be visiting it accidentally don't see it as their reality. They see it as your circumstance or your situation. And since they are who they are, they can knock on your door, say hello, and leave. They're not bound to stay, or if they're interested, they may stay. If they're not interested, they're free to leave. All the things that you may or may not be, they're free to experience, to stay or leave. But they do reflect that you are free to stay or leave. But there are other considerations that they don't have. And that there is a creative grid and agreements and interactions that you're caring for. But you still have their right of freedom if it's not your place. So that's like something allows you to be in the grid or in the reality that you're in. And so then you are working and choosing a space. And somehow, so far, you've been able to manage what would have been unthinkable without a job, without a circumstance, or this or that. But that somehow you teach music or sound or reaching your music, reaching yourself. Everyone's taken a spin off of the energy and made it look logical. So they can say, Derek, what do you do? And you say, I'm a music teacher. Okay. And they say, Ursula, what do you do? Like doing. Yeah. I say, let me, what do I do? Show me your palm. And I'll tell you what I do. And I say, why do I have to show you the palm? I want to see if you're the police or not. And you're looking for palm readers, okay.
Oh, Danny, that's a good
But what do you do again, Derek?
Yeah, I do also teach music. Yes.
Okay, so they used to say that, I think it was Vishnu that took the sweat. Oh no, no, it was Shiva who then made the baby out of his sweat. Maybe that was, I'll see which baby he made out of the sweat where he took the.
I Ganesh?
swept his body. Oh no, she did.
Kartikeya?
No,
Kartikeya?
Shakti. Shakti made the Ganesh. What
Oh.
she did was, what happened was that Shiva would walk in on the bath. That's one of the stories. And the maids of Shakti then complained that it was rude for him to walk in on the bath like that. So then she made a baby out of a perspiration in the bath water. And it was the baby Ganesh. It was beautiful. And he guarded the door.
Mhm.
So when Shiva came, he beat up Shiva to protect his mommy. And then Shiva came and beheaded him, had a whole army come after him. And then while he was fighting, he beheaded him. So then Shakti broke up with Shiva because of that and wouldn't sleep with him any longer unless he had a head, the boy had a head. So then they said any baby that was looking away from its mother, that head would be available. So they found an elephant baby looking away from the mother and they gave it the elephant's head. So she was still pissed off with the elephant's head, supposedly. So then she made a deal, and it was like Jesus' deal, that before you can talk to Shiva, you have to go through Ganesh. So before you can talk to God, you have to go through Jesus. So they may have adopted that from Christianity, you know, but that somehow
That's interesting.
Ganesh was your doorway to God.
Mm.
And any questions with God, you would have it for Ganesh first, and then God. Ganesh would let you talk to God or something like that beyond that. So it was supposed to be a pure experience. But supposedly what it was a child that came out of woman, not man. The other son came out of, what's the other son?
Kartikeya.
Kartikeya, that's right. That's the Hindi name, but there's another slang name. But
Oh.
Kartikeya. So Kartikeya then was had a weird situation. I think that wasn't it where they were making love and it was interrupted by the bird. It knocked on the door, interrupted them making love. So then somehow he ejaculated on the floor, and the bird ate it and flew with it over the Himalayas and dropped the sperm in the Himalayas, and it rolled down into the Ganges. And there were 7 women who were bathing there when this baby appeared, and they all, milk came from their breast. And the baby then got 7 heads so that it would please each mother.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
So that's Kartikeya. And Kartikeya supposedly is reason, while Ganesh supposedly is fun. So they settled scores once when I think Shiva and Shakti sat in chairs in the center of the room and said, okay, that whoever is to take the throne must fly through the cosmos 7 times. So Ganesh jumped on a bird, I forget the bird there, and literally flew around the universe 7 times. But Ganesh walked around his parents 7 times. The winner was to get twin lovers to create a new population in the universe. So I think because he was clever and smart, he just walked around and he said his parents were the center of the universe. And so therefore he didn't have to fly around the world. He just walked around his parents 7 times. And so he was the clever one, the funny one, while the other one was the logical one who did the literal thing all the time. Interesting stories. But one was only came out of man. So he was logical. He flew around the world. And the other one came out of the female, which was funny and pleasant, and who then walked around you 7 times and joked about it.
Mm.
So that was supposedly the premises of female-male relationship to a similar act.
Mm-hmm.
And roles and circumstance that they're in. when you have experienced that, let's say, Ursha, you were literally a mother, making sure that your kids went to school. Remember that time? And it made them stop arguing. You had to watch, make sure that they were okay and they didn't get in trouble. And were you into it?
Yes, when they were young, yes. Yeah.
You were into it, and they were into it also with you. Okay. And so, can you throw yourself back there for a moment? And you say, "Okay, get dressed now. We have to go soon." Oh, here's a mother here now. Hello. Can you hear? Is your sound on? Diana.
You're talking to me?
Okay, so let's say all of you have children, right? How the hell did you do that? How did you pull that one off? You must have really done some magical shit to pull that one off. The woman I met in India and all that, you became an old lady with kids and grandkids. That's a Jesus, Mary, and Joseph journey that you've been on. And you're still you. Okay. So it was okay experience. It must have been weird at times.
It still is. I have another one on the way.
Okay.
Another being. Oh my God.
No, that's okay though. You're not a, well, look, maybe the memory of you, but they allow you access to the grandkids.
All the time. They preference. Like my daughter was just up here for a couple of days. And she's
So that's worth hanging around for.
Pardon?
I say that's worth hanging around for the grandkids.
Oh my God, so beautiful. My one granddaughter graduated from middle school, and so she's going to be 14.
Yeah.
And I think they're totally pure and innocent. And then I hear
that's what I would say, that there is, but that you caught a break and your kids don't stand in the way.
oh no.
Because usually, well, there's a difference between the history and the mystery. So with the grandchildren, it's automatic. There's no history between you, that mom did this to me and dad did that and this. Okay. But basically, if in fact it's, you should be able to have a groovy scene with your kids. I would say coming out of that part of Queens, groovy, somehow you can create groovy.
DMT. That was Christmas one time. We did DMT together.
Yeah. So
But now I did DMT, and he led me on a journey.
yeah, no. So somehow you shifted the scene where they say, "Hey, we got a cool mommy."
Oh yeah,
But
finally.
usually they'll have a fight with the regular mommy. To their friends, they may say, "We got a cool mommy. She went to India. We did all this shit and that." But then with the real mommy, they say, "You old mother jumper, will you leave me alone?" and stuff. Okay, so let's say the memory of you is more you than you.
Yep. No, I live between both worlds. You know, I have to.
Yes. So somehow the memory of you, and so then you see that Jai is also in a similar situation where they have to describe her as being hip, coming from Woodstock, owning the clubs in Greenwich Village, and then with Krishnamurti, and yet, okay, and at the same time, but when they get in the room, they say, "You old lady, will you stop the shit with me?" Whatever. Okay. Because she could see their boyfriends aren't cool or something like that. She could see too much. Mommy can see too much.
They see more than I do. I birth kids that can see more than I. That's the problem.
Of course, yeah. No, they were just here with that, but it's our kids are born free
Yes.
to find their life. They don't have jobs beforehand. They're not enslaved to so much karma. So somehow your relationship in this situation made sure it wasn't a karmic one. And it may look Meshuggah at times because they're not exactly trained to have this job or do that job. They're trained to have a life. And so what looked like Meshuggah for all of us, that this young woman from Queens who was a nurse would then go to India and then be a dancing girl in Rishikesh when I see her accidentally. And I say, what the who? Okay. And so then I see that somehow the nurse was someone who cared for something, who then got into a situation, and I see her then caring for this guru. Okay. And then so all of a sudden she's made a career out of this one kind of caring, gave her a life. And then all of a sudden she's here, she's there, she's now married, she has children, she's got this, and she's in there. How the hell did she pull that off? And they say, it's all been a journey for her. And somehow on the journey, if you see a hey baby moment, all of a sudden the doorway opens up and you make a life where the life all of a sudden starts from that hey baby moment. You want to try this thing. When we came here, when we all left around India around that time, when then I ran into Jenny, and she was kind of leaving New Zealand, Australia, and we found out a whole story later. But that somehow we were all free to have relationships. You say, okay, you want to go to Woodstock, and without a job, without a house, without a circumstance, someone says, hey, there's a car waiting for you in Woodstock. There's an apartment in the Bronx. You can meet someone in California, San Francisco, and you see it comes, who the hell would have done that? Logically, how illogical it was. And yet you see it was so normal. And to have some talks and to have meetings with friends and then to connect and then people visit and hung out and a whole Meshuggah situation developed. And you say, well, what's the philosophy again? I say, it's you put the lime in the coconut and you shake it all up. And I would say it's darshan yoga, or just people hanging out. And in the hanging out, experiences happen, but they were hanging out from a kind of feeling. So for a period of time, everything was surrendered, the literalness to the hanging out being the life itself. And out of hanging out, I think other relationships came. And they were relationships that it may have just been a glance of the eye or an attraction for the moment or whatever. It didn't have that much historical mandate or history in it. And so these old ladies went out and created families. How the hell did she pull that off? And that old lady went out and created a family. With Rajni, how the hell did you do that? And then you with the Shanti, how the hell did you create a whole family out of the Shanti? All these Meshuggah ideas. And yet you seem to have pretty hip kids. None of them having a job, though. Or a literal job, but all of them somehow having a creative expression or a spin-off. What's the philosophy again?
No job.
Somehow.
The philosophy is not to have a boss.
Did you hear that one?
Not to have a box.
Not to have a box. I wouldn't mind a box if you give me one.
A BOSS.
Oh, boss.
Not to have a boss.
Oh,
Not to have a boss, to be your own person.
Well, to be your own person, you are anyway. So if you elected to be a boss, it's a move that you're making. So let's put it this way. Our lives are now our own. Whatever we do, we do. So if you go into this relationship, it's no longer, then it's you doing it. It's not your mother doing it, your uncle doing it, your history, the Bronx. Okay. That's all you now. Let's say your past is your mystery, not your history. You meet your mother in your own life. You start to see parallel lives. Okay. So in that you see then that somehow you wanted babies. And somehow you then left all these Meshuggah guys to find a literal person. And you did Hey Baby. You did your version of Hey Baby. Okay. And so Hey Baby but it kind of has to be true. You can't, because the person the person can't avoid a true invitation, but can resist it if it's coming from a trip. So let's say there's you and you. There was some babies that had to come out of you, and somehow you had to plan to keep it spiritual enough without it being too lame. So what you pulled off, and then say, let's say you wanted to have somehow before you go, to have a grandchild that says, hey, grandma, that mantra alone of pure love, pure feeling shared. You've been on a journey in relationship to Hey Grandma. What a mashugana. And you see in Hey Grandma another conversation that even will there be in memory, beyond the form, beyond the passing. And somehow you've managed with the kids that you're free to have that relationship, which is almost an impossible Einsteinian job for most mothers whose kids then got pissed off with them or whatever at the same time. That they then meet their mom as a human being who happens to be their mother, but it was someone who loved them, who's doing mother for them.
That was its own style. That was its own style.
So let's say we get a peep of our life as an artwork, as a sadhana, as a journey, and then there's us that's managing it. And so you kind of you understand why the management was there, that no one could talk you out of a situation, that somehow there was a creative dimension happening that you were there for without fully knowing it. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
It's like we're flying past each other.
Every once in a while, the eclipse that comes.
This morning,
I from this guy Bernard, who lived at the ashram for many, many years, and I hadn't connected with him in 40 years. He, I don't know, he just sent me a parcel with some old photos from back in the day.
Yeah, that's funny. I've got a ton of those also.
Yeah.
That I can fly through. Well, actually, on my website, I think many of them are still there. Different periods of the experience.
Oh.
What do you make of this all, Kai? You see your own experience in it?
Yes, I do.
Kai, your children are not, yes.
Well, I'm saying but I am also saying that this is my experience of you, from my perspective, meeting you, was meeting you in a circumstance.
Me.
When I'm saying each of you has also, I have a different relationship, but there's a similar thread that runs through each of the relationships, but I've met you in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a similar thread that runs through the story, a similar creative thread that runs through the story, each story being very different, seemingly, but each story having that similar yearning and thread running through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And somehow it required a kind of, if anyone would have said to the nurse, don't go to India, you're just going to have a broken heart. Don't hook up with this guru guy. It's a broken heart is obviously there. And then you see 1, 2, 3, 7 approaches to, no one could talk her out of the broken heart. She would slip out the bathroom window. She would sneak away, but she must have that experience. Then you saw that it wasn't logic. The relationship was with that experience. So then she found forms that may have been nuts for the rest of the world, but were exact constructs to have that experience, to invite you into a place and then kick you out of it, to lose it and find it. But you see that the broken heart has been the quest, and the broken heart is not a flaw. The broken heart is a relationship to a true love. So it experiences, as it has the experiences of the body in the world, it still is longing for that experience. So it has a relationship with a true love that's somehow hanging out in the atmosphere. If you do the mantras or you do some shit, but somehow it has to be true, but it's hanging out. And somehow you see that it is a relationship to the broken heart is to see the life from the other space. Not the history, but the mystery. So there has been something in one's being, I think, and then in one's body that is having a conversation with the outer. And one assumes the identity of that dialogue. So then they say, what's the logic of her going to India and doing this and doing that when she had a profession and she say, I would look at it as almost a creative act, a purely creative act where she interrupted her karma that everyone had planned for her, escaped a karmic situation. The babies in her that had to be born still was going to demand that she literalize it. But she was able to do both. She was able to have a creative life, a movie of a life, and a literal person who gets Social Security. Right?
Yeah, they'll pay me for the rest of my life.
Not bad.
Not bad. I live for free and don't have to pay taxes anymore.
You lived in the, well, you had to do weird though. And so there had to be moments when the dialogue is with an energy in the story, then there were alone nights, there were alone days, there, what the hell, there's this, because the one is not the self, literally. One is also a creative act themselves. It's a weird one. That comes when you find yourself in situations that are weird. We were discussing that today with this fellow who came to teach us about pot or something. And he was in the military for a long time and special forces. And then he suffered from PTSD as he came back to have a family. And then they're over. So the pot. So I said, well, PTSD that you're trying to get rid of is probably your body trying to manage some weird trip because you must have really killed people or hurt people. And so it's protecting you, not getting rid of it. It's not normal. So then you understand that seeing something where you then come back from a different place into the story. So I then saw the body processes as not being psychologically something that but was more your body trying to protect itself. And it was beautifully done. So I was kidding around when I got the vaccination and I came home and my immune system said, you dirty bastard, you betrayed us. And I said, well, and I said, because I got the shot. It says, no, because you failed to recognize how heavy the work we've been doing with you as an immune system and all that. And so then you had to kind of give the body a kiss. And so now I can see my body even processing the vaccinations and working with it. So you see the process is going on in your body now, where there is are you okay with it, kidney? Are you okay with it, liver? So I just got an examination for the bladder cancer again. It seems like I got another year. Anyway, where it's pretty cool. And so we've been playing with a year here. And see what unfolds for us. Is that okay, Kai? Something like that? Give it another year. This has been a very interesting one-day year, hasn't it? It's just been like one long day. And somehow it's gone. We've passed this year and a half so far. What happened again? It just normalized. Okay. But we still have been in a kind of suspended animation, where activity was not, and in fact, in most cases, when they say, you want to do this, and I say, nah, maybe tomorrow, and it was a kind of mañana situation,
Mhm.
you know. And I have been taking, Mary has been growing that RSO oil for me that I've tried, but it was just I found that there were certain times when I got a small cut or something like that, that all of a sudden there'd be an overreaction of the immune system.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden my leg would blow up or this or that over what was a simple thing, but the body was overreading. And you start to see that that's natural in the situation. So I have been trying this Rick Simpson oil that Mary then is legally, she can grow now. So she's really into making that stuff. So I'm into in the morning taking some of that. But what it does do is doesn't get you high, it gets you mellow, with a body mellow. And so we would call it, it's a female aspect of the indica, not the sativa. It's not the active one, but it's more what you would call the mañana one, where you're not in such a rush to have to do this and you have to do that. It changes time a little bit for you. So I'm
You
kind
might
of
have needed. I said you might have needed that.
Well, I was seeing that basically, well, we did know quite a few people who had died of sepsis.
Mhm.
In fact, quite a few of them who were taking the LSD and other stuff like that in the plants or going, but that a small thing became a large thing. An ingrown toenail all of a sudden kicked off inflammation in the body. So then you say, no, the inflammation was there in the body.
Mhm.
You see that. So somehow I used naively. He used it for his own cancer, but so I used a naive thing in the premise that somehow relaxing the body was itself, it had its own intelligence to it, you know. And that's what I've been doing.
Nice.
But I have had a couple of cancers in the past. Somehow, it's hard to even remember. The one cancer was my father's cancer. It was an incarnation of an experience, actually, that changed the friendship. Like where I can say, I'm sorry, Pop, for giving you such a hard time.
Mhm.
I didn't realize you were a person. You understand?
Right.
And I said, when I realized, holy shit, how much for this poor guy, he had to have a secret life to take care of these weird kids. Okay. That to have he probably had to have a private life that you would then get on his case for having a private life. And then you see the same in your mother, that you discover in the diary that she was a woman, and not only a woman, but a hot woman. You understand? Something you would have never allowed her as a child, or that somehow you own the story. But you discover another dimension, and you see you come more from a mystery than a history. These Meshuggah people were doing their version of parents. When they discover you, this Meshuggah old lady is doing her version of parents. And she's doing hot old lady who goes to India and does all this shit. What a grandma to have. Would you like to have a grandma like that, Kai?
Yes, I would love to have a grandma like that.
She go, you know, my grandma, you know what she does? She's got a guru in India and she goes to see him and they do some kind of weird shit, of mantras, and they know what they're talking about. Could you believe that conversation? Or it could be the other one. What a crazy old lady she is. We can't wait for her to get the hell out of here and go to India already. Okay. So both things are in.
What's kind of funny is we're raising the kids without a faith. But my granddaughter, she's 5 and came over the weekend to go to the river and get together with my son and my other granddaughter. And I have a Buddha and he has a light. I put a light underneath him. So she asked for the light. And then she goes up in prayer and she says, without even knowing, she says, hello, I would like to see you. Thank you so much, God. Amen. Serious. I know.
So you understand that she's you.
No, she's like
You
more
understand,
than that's
you know what's waiting for her. You know the experiences. She's not going to find a job so easily. Whatever she does, she's going to. So you understand that somehow you have her on a quest, and her quest is
she's
with a pure
delightful.
love, with true love.
She can just be delightful her whole life. I don't care.
No, you've passed it on. You've
Yeah.
passed it on. You passed on that there is a relationship with some mystery out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that
the morning.
somehow the person is going to have it no matter what, even if it makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
She has it. I didn't even know I have an image of Jesus from the SRF, which is the prettiest picture of him. And I have a rainbow for the morning light, and it was reflecting a rainbow on him. And so she went over and she said, Jesus, I'm going to grab your rainbow. And she tried to take it. She just so sweet. I mean, it's just a blessing. After all of this, it's a blessing to see.
There's another nice picture of Jesus had 14 steps to the cross. I think on the fourth step, he fell down.
Yes.
And Veronica came out of the crowd and wiped his face with her shawl.
Yes.
As a pure, affectionate love act. And then his face appeared on the shawl.
Yes, yes.
So she is called, Veronica is the mother of photography. Because someone transferred the picture onto the shawl out of pure affection,
Yeah.
But that's one of, I have the 14 stages of the cross, and that's one of the ones, Veronica, where it was pure love, where she wiped the face of Jesus. And then she was blessed with the pure act, So let's say, okay, we're visiting a lot of schmaltz. You're okay? All the schmaltz happens to be true and Meshuggah at the same time.
Right.
Are you okay with that world?
Beautiful story.
I say you're doing Meshuggah. Do you want the job? Meshuggah was holy, that somehow one kept a Meshuggah view of the world to keep their humanity together. While the world was turning into a dumb place, Meshuggah meant that you were kind of, your relationship was with the energy. And it seems to me that you stuck around long enough. I forgive you for sneaking away from Santa Rosa. Now that you got grandkids, now I understand the whole plan.
Yeah, that's why I snuck away. I mean, honestly, I don't know. It was the first guy I saw.
The plan. Okay, there was an experience waiting for you that you had to do.
I know.
And that you had to do it. You had to do it. There was some experience waiting for you, and it had to be the weirdest. So that you had to keep it private and hidden and this and that because it was so weird.
It was so opposite of who I was.
But you needed to have that grandchild, so.
Yep.
Okay, now you're free to stay or hang around or go. You've accomplished your karma. No, you've accomplished basically the reflection. This time is creative time to hang with or to schmooze with.
This year, Swamiji's going to be 90. Swamiji's going to be 90 this year. And he's finally becoming human. Human.
I've been hanging around for 20 years to have because I've been waiting to have him and myself just hanging out in the room that we needed to have that day. You understand?
You can have it. I mean,
because
he's
for me,
hilarious.
even with Doctor and everyone, it has been kind of hanging out that has been the true spirituality of this hanging out and having this intimate relationship, friendship, and normalizing it. And the whole philosophy, even with Doctor, came out of everyone was broke in Woodstock. It didn't come out of India. It came out of Woodstock when we got there, and everyone was kind of hanging out in the same teepee in the same space there. And we were broke, but there was in this mosh pit of hanging out, the whole thing was experienced. The whole thing was, the whole philosophy, the whole darshan yoga came out of that sort of situation. You know, it was religious without a religion in some way. It was Meshuggah. I'll call it that, but I would say fools for love. So my relationship was not a put down to, it was, the doctor was a fool for love. We were all fools for love. The philosophy, in fact, was being fools for love. And you see all the other dimensions that came out of that. Was that somehow you see that relationships opened up doorways of possibilities and experiences. But that for us, most of the expressions came out of the sadhana, or the journey. So even when it literalized, if I would have walked in on you in a literal situation, I would have seen you in a circumstance, like a play that you were in, or a movie that you were in. And I would have seen that your commitment was to the sadhana. But that very few people shared it with you while you were in the literal story.
Yeah.
So then it's the relationship then with Swamiji now is that you look at the literal world from the sadhana. But then you go back into the literal world, but basically you see the world from the journey.
Yeah.
That somehow you had an experience there. Once you went to India, you had an experience that changed the picture, and you re-entered the story from a different place.
Right.
So you
Correct.
see that you went into the literal story from a different place. But I also feel that there was some truth around the grandchild pureness. I see that with Janet, and there's just an instant connection. But I also see where with others, where their kids won't let them come close to the kid, won't let them come close to the grandchildren, and there is a kind of suffering that goes on in that. With the history
I
and the
couldn't imagine. I mean, my grandchildren, like if I'm with Ariella and Kristen isn't there, she calls me Ma.
Yeah.
So if Kristen's
No,
gone,
don't go too far with it,
I'm
but
Ma.
you understand it is an act of beauty, and it's worth hanging around for.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. Otherwise, why? Otherwise, why?
Okay. Everyone else okay? Kai, you're okay then? It's interesting conversations. It's like we're sitting on a cloud and we're conversing about our life on Earth. You know, but we're seeing it from the cloud. We're seeing it from the cloud perspective, and then we descend then into the body and assume the literal reality of a circumstance. But we've had the cloud experience, so we're kind of coming from. We're coming from the cloud experience where it's almost as if the angel comes back into the form and says, well, I say, if you ask the angel, do you want to do Urja? She's 81 years old in Bala, Colorado, and her neck hurts. And the angel says, sure. Does she have any money in the bank? But the angel says, let me do Urja for a year. That would be like a movie. Where Urja may be used to being Urja, the angel would love to try a year of being Urja. So I think that this is what the virus has just done to us. It's interrupted time and space and made it more of a movie, or has movie elements or creative elements into it. But you're okay. No one's sick out there?
For me in California, no, I live in a forest. So if you remember Santa Rosa and you remember the Russian River, and you remember when we used to go to the movie and Celia would play her cello and we would pass the hat for the movie? Yeah. That's where I live.
They had good movies there too. They had.
I know. It's up for sale if you want it. We can get it. It's just a tinge of memories.
Well, I think something that's happening in Santa Rosa, it's also about to burn and be destroyed, isn't it? Or it has been. I think we're facing that now in the drought or whatever. It's very hot here.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's always, but now I'm living up on a hill. And so only if the ridge crosses the river, then perhaps. But so far it
Do you-
hasn't crossed the river.
do you see Reed at all, or
No,
he
I
pops?
don't. I need to see in the picture I have from the old day in Woodstock who Reed is. So we've never connected. I mean, I literally live 10 miles away.
I see.
So
And
from
so
the
then,
old picture, the
no, but I
Woodstock,
think I have some photographs of you in the same picture with Reed in it.
yeah, you'd have to just send it to me with like a circle around who he is.
Well, I
Because
would
it's
have to
hard to
find
tell
out.
50 years later who we are, 40 years
Do you
later.
know? Did you remember Sandy?
Yes, no, I loved Sandy.
Yeah. So
Is she
she's
still
been.
here?
Well, she had a son, and she was remarried. She was with Claude years ago in those days, and but she had a baby out there in Santa Rosa. Then grew up to be a musician, and boy, they've all had experiences. Everybody has had their own movie.
If you could send me contact information,
Everyone has. Everyone
love
is.
them.
It would be. Everyone is hard to believe the story that they've all had. I guess I only
I'm
hear
sure.
about it. I haven't had real contact for more than 30 years or so.
Right.
But that
Yeah.
young man, Michael, remember Michael?
Names are just names.
It was Michael and Stephen. So Michael died there, I think.
Okay.
a
On
year or
Spear
so
Road.
ago.
I go past there sometimes.
Yeah.
Spear Road. Remember?
So I had met one of the fellows there, Stephen. He moved to Colorado and Boulder there years ago, and he was a kind of guru there. So at times I visited them to lend them a hand when they were maybe having some tough times.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so everyone, and then Wendell. I don't know if you remember Wendell. Wendell
I
got
remember Wendell very well.
So Wendell got a
Because
MacArthur
loved
grant.
Martha.
So Wendell got a MacArthur grant, Genius Award,
Yes.
out of Yale for attempting. I guess his book was AI. He's trying
Okay.
to. He's trying to keep AI from running away with us. He's keeping it human. So everybody has their thing. I think that.
So Wendell is still around.
Wendell, I don't know if he's still around, but he's out there in Yale, I think.
Okay. Yeah, no, I
And then there's
remember when
also
he was there in Uttarkashi as well.
into what?
He was in Uttarkashi with us. Wendell and Peter. Remember Peter, Swiss Peter?
Yeah, Peter, I think was maybe moved to the Philippines.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you remember. Boy, everyone had a life, made a life for themselves.
Yeah, no, we were very
speak
young.
to Eric. I speak to Evan and Louisa. Evan used to be Sudhir, but Evan and Louisa, they're in Italy.
And Martha and Celia?
I don't. I think that they went their own way, but Martha then married Chuck. Remember that guy Chuck from Canada? There, he was a piano teacher and musician, and she was, I think, a professor of cello.
Yeah, they were both.
Harpsichord.
She and Celia both
I
were.
think she was a professor. She's a professor of harpsichord at. What is that in Canada? What country? What state is that in Canada up there? Above Seattle.
Above Seattle,
What's
like
the big place
Vancouver.
in- Vancouver. I think they're out of Vancouver.
Huh.
So,
What's her last name? Do you remember her last name? Martha.
I don't know what it is now. I don't know what it is now because she was married to Chuck for quite a few years.
But then?
I think it was to have children, the same as you, that somehow she got married someone to have the babies.
Somebody
so
injected us.
I think all of you are in the
We're
children
injected.
world.
Yeah. We were injected.
Somehow
Karmically.
somehow you made choices to have children.
Yeah.
That weren't logical for your situation.
Nope.
But
I'd
were
rather the
created.
cave.
No, if it was a movie, it was a correct choice. If it was logical, telling you what
No.
to live and how to live, okay. So let's say, but if it was a creative act, you somehow made sure your baby was composed of these chemicals and sounds and issues, but that the kids are born free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel that there is something quite beautiful in it. And it's also given each of us a life in some way.
A purpose.
And well, if there's an invitation that says, "Hey, baby, why don't you hang around for a while?"
Mm-hmm.
Then I say, "Okay, I'll give it a shot."
Right.
But the
I'm
only thing
happy
is,
for the grandkids.
that's why I'm saying with the grandkids, it has to be
For them.
sincere. So with the grandkids, there's a kind of truth in the invitation.
Yeah. There's no
And
story there.
that would be the same, I think, in the love affair, that somehow there has to have a hey baby in it, no trip.
Mm-hmm.
And so sure, I'll hang around for a bit.
Yeah.
Why not? Is that okay, deaf God? Jesus,
Mhm.
body, you want to hang around for a bit? Another year, okay, God, okay, God. Talk straight. Another year, okay.
It's all a
I say,
mystery.
okay. I say, body, you still into it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing these kind of weird exercises and okay.
Mhm.
And
We
opening up the
always
sense
did
of
weird
smell and
exercise.
this and that. So then I say, okay, I'll hang around. Urja, with all the shit you've gone through, you want to do another year?
Yes.
I mean, you're just sitting doing Netflix, another year of Netflix. There'll be some insights coming to you on Netflix. God will reveal itself. The energy will reveal itself, and someone will come to fix the Netflix for you, and then there will be some accidental situation, if you wish. So, and Derek, you also feel to hang out in the form of Derek for a while, or you want to?
So far, so good.
You'll do Derek.
Mhm.
Okay, you sure now?
Well, when you put it that way.
So I would say that when I look at your situation, what you're calling normal in San Francisco, I would feel very magical. That when we kid around, that John and you then found someone, and you married to get a green card. I got a green card when we came from India, also like that. And what we had, but you see that there was an act of deeper affection in that. But you also see that somehow you were married in the energy, not so much the literalness. So anytime it becomes a possessive, there will be an argument or a fight because it's not a possessive, it's a creative act together. And it's if people are into it. And so somehow you have been able to pull this situation off where you've navigated in a town that they say is very hard to live in, how expensive it is and what it's going through and all the changes and everything. And somehow you've been able to live teaching music, teaching sound, what a Meshuggah scene you're in. And that she's also able to create her own thing and do her own thing, and you're able to. So it's a theater that you're in. It runs as long as you're into it. But it does give you an insight immediately without having had to go to India, without having had to do this, where in fact the environment that you're in is your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're regular people going through a regular experience. But at the same time, it is clearly a voluntary one. No one is forcing anyone. So I admire it. It's Meshuggah. Of course, most of us are fools for a broken heart. So if you lose a true thing, when is the broken heart guarantee is when you threw it away. And so there's a moment waiting for you, an accidental moment where you see that you've had the thing you were looking for and you threw it away. So you visit aspects of the self. But the broken heart is not literally your possessive. It means when you release the story to another energy and it sees the story from a different place. And you see that there's you, the literal you, and there's you, the journey. And so you see the relationship to the journey is in fact what you're building your life around. And so then you see much of your intimate relationships are people who share that sense of the journey, the naive sense of a journey with you. So when you're spending time with them, you're seeing your literal world from the friendship. And you're seeing then how to manage a literal world from the sadhana, from the journey. And you also see then how to manage a relationship that has kind of come out of saying, hey, baby, do you want to do this? And you say, okay, let's get a green card so that'll straighten out your life. And you see how remarkably creative that dumb act is. And you see how remarkably that one was true to that, but it's not a possessive. You don't own it. And yet in the usual world, relationship becomes a possessive. But you stepped into a kind of magical, weird situation. Hey, you want to get a green card, you get married, and that becomes your life. You see that you've stepped into Broadway stage where you're then playing out a love relationship. And when you have an audience watching you, you then have to be true about it. No one needs a bullshit scene. If you're not into it, we'll catch you later. What's the problem? So somehow, there may be moments when you realize how deeply it is that each of us have somehow maintained a creative life. Okay, I'm going to retire for the day, I think. Nice seeing you again, all. Maybe I'll say, oh, tomorrow night I'm on with Derek, huh?
Thank you, Danny.
Nice to see you. I think of you every now and then, Kiana.
Thank
You
you.
fly past.
I
sent it to-
fly.
Yeah, you fly fast. It's
I'm
good to.
ever present, though. I mean, I'm always here. And, I'd love to meet these people because I'm through San Francisco every week on my way to Half Moon Bay for my daughter.
Yeah.
Because they're from a different dimension of the sadhana.
No, I think that they're hidden in plain sight down the block of people that, but somehow it has to be accidental, but they are there. Probably with this
It's
situation,
accidental.
it'll happen. Probably it can't literally happen. Like in the old days where you say, hey, there's a girl, but I think I do that anyway. If I say, there's a kid in the neighborhood, can you look out for her or something?
No, I think you just need to get on a plane and come to San Francisco and then we all meet.
Mary may be going.
One last hurrah for anyone over here anyway.
There may be a time when you visit out here and I'll bring out the Yogi-ji and I'm going to tell him I'm going to still bite him in the nose because we didn't finish our conversation.
No, he's not coming anymore.
And I had to have, what's his name, yelling at me and...
no, Mangalan can come. I see Mangalan all the time. He's still here because of COVID.
Yeah, it's weird. It's all weird stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, he still dresses the same way as a Naga Baba. In Corte Madera. Yes.
But he's still Gil Levy, though.
Huh? Gil Levy.
He's still Gil Levy.
Yeah.
He's still Gil Levy. So let's say if I say then to Sitaram, was no longer Sitaram, but Sri Puri. Yeah.
Maram Maharaj.
Come on, bro, I met your parents, I met you this, I knew you that. I knew you when you were crying because your girlfriend left you. We got busted for pot together and we were actually in jail. I then moved, he and Rosa Bubani, remember Rosa Bubani? I don't know, that was his girlfriend at the time. And
Oh, no,
and
now he has a
Daniel,
young
who
thing like a
died.
baby.
So then I say, look, we've shared all that, and the goof and the moves and the situation. Let me see. Holy shit. It was a holy shit experience.
Mhm.
Okay. So then we say, okay, we've been in this movie together
Mhm.
and we've assumed identities and we've assumed philosophies and we've assumed this and that. And but I still feel that it was a quest for boyfriend and girlfriend. There's still, no matter what accomplishment, even if they're Einstein, they're a fool for a girlfriend.
Mhm.
So let's say the schmucky part of them is what I admired. That
Mhm.
even your guru, what I liked about him was that he was still, no matter what level he was on or doing or whatever, he was a fool for love.
Mhm.
And Doctor was a fool
Still
for
is.
love. No matter what the philosophy, you see that there was a different relationship and intimacy than there was in the literal world. So I
Mhm.
feel that you saved his life. Do you understand? And that's what you did. You were still a nurse. You went in there and you saved these poor Meshuggah guys' lives. Because you saw how Meshuggah they were, how fools for love, no matter what they accomplished, no matter what they did,
Oh,
a fool for a feeling. They were a fool for love and they had a mission. So I feel that you saved their lives in their kulos and gave them another dimension where then the person can come in the room and say, therefore, but when they come to you, there was a kind of affection that you cared for.
Mhm.
And they showed you a part of them that they kind of hidden in life.
Mhm.
So then you understand that I met the person in that experience of our dumbness, of being schmucks with a boyfriend or a girlfriend and crying over a girlfriend or a boyfriend, no matter how accomplished you were. And you met that even, so then you met a Jesus and you met that he couldn't be with his girlfriend. And so then you humanized the experience.
Mhm. To have kids.
And so therefore, the woman that did the dancing girl routine in the ashrams in those days brought a dimension to the story that was missing. And without that dimension, it was a pretty schmucky scene.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay. But with that dimension, we gave a schmucky scene schmaltz and feeling and depth.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I feel that your presence, and you always had a presence that was going to do what it was going to do. It was going to split when it wanted to split. It may have done it through this way and that way, but that somehow you had a relationship to an energy in the world. Good luck.
Thank you.
How does it look?
It's lovely to be with you still, Danny. I
Well, that may
have great gratitude.
Let's see, if the world is going to die, maybe everyone will come out here to hang out then. You understand?
I'll come. I mean, I travel.
No, I'm
I do
saying, but
travel.
it's not so much, but basically it's shifting here. But then we were just kidding around today, but there is kind of heartfelt conversation about a shifting scene and storyline, but everyone seems to be still into it.
Mhm.
Have really invested, have growing their own and this and that and what kind of, so it's pretty interesting. And there's grandchildren waiting out there also.
Mhm.
So visiting, I think next week, my son Raphael is coming down and that's with just here. So there'll be some conversations. They've made a life out of this weird experience.
Mhm. Yeah, it would be
Genuinely,
fun to get the kids together. Like my son is
no,
41.
there are some there must be 100 or more hip kids out there.
Yeah, it would be
Who are
great
pretty
to do.
all the kids are really on the ball.
Yep.
They may not be able to get jobs so easily.
Well, here it's
Because
marijuana. So here is marijuana world and the money is good. It's all about the earth.
since Mary's been growing that for me, we had a meeting today with this guy that I was helping who had PTSD, but he's become an expert on the growing. So we'll say we may do our own thing. But do look up this RSO oil, Rick Simpson
Yeah,
oil.
the Rick Simpson oil. Okay, I'll do
it's
that.
naive, but it kind of is schmaltzy enough where it relaxes the body, I felt. So
Hey,
once you do it,
amen
then
to
you
that.
once you do it, then it's like Mary is creating her own thing with me out of a kind of love affair.
That's
So when
lovely.
it comes out of the love affair, I'll just do stupid. And as long as there's a true invitation, then we have 3 big black dogs here. And so it's a thing of beauty if you're into it, and it's a weird scene if you're not.
Yeah, it's a thing of beauty.
So at this point in time, you're kind of making sure that people don't have to do it out of fear, but are into it. They're into the cooking, they're into the growing, they're into the lifestyles. So even though there may be a real world for them outside where they have to be, somehow there's a space where they're free to do the thing. So something has allowed it. And I think I'm agreeing to hang for another year with it.
Good.
When I
Good.
got this bladder test the other day, he went up there with the camera and I looked at it. And he says, you don't have to come back for a year. So then I say, okay, we'll play with that creatively a year. You know.
Good.
And originally we just have that agreement. Now, what about, we've been kind of seeing Jai off, who's the oldest of everyone. But she, I think, would like to do Cranky. She can't do Cranky with us, though. But her kids are cool now. And I think that, but we are kind of comfortable with the living and dying being naturally part of the situation. And somehow, I told that story where they called me from my father here because he stopped eating. And so then when I flew out there, then I saw that it was a plan that he had with a few friends there in Brooklyn, you know, and that it was sane. But the way the world was constructed, you kind of had to hide it with a couple of friends.
Right.
Who were looking out for you. So then I saw even my parents had a similar kind of situation that we grew up in. That kind of friendships created a kind of truth or a creative affection. That was conversations that you couldn't have in the literal world, but it was the hanging out that came from the sadhana, not so much from the survival. And came from the quest. So it wasn't that we were forced to survive. It's that we were choosing to hang out or to live, that there was some kind of choice going on in there creatively. So keep in touch like this, okay? And I'm on Sunday. You've been on before. There were a couple of hundred versions of you out there that if you see them, you won't believe it.
Oh.
There's a version of you in Sicily. There's a version of you, okay, around the world that we may run into again. So let's say that I haven't had, it's only Reed jumped back into the picture last year. I've always had a circumstance with Sandy because especially when once her son came with a very strong woman who had she wanted a baby so bad when she got breast cancer, she got a double mastectomy. But she was intense. And then there was a whole school of double mastectomy around having the baby. And then having the baby, the cancer came back in the liver or whatever. But meanwhile, the whole family was going through how strong she was and fought it off. And my mother was there. But yet, so Sasha went through all of that. And then, but Sandy had to witness the whole thing and care for it. And the baby then came weighing 1.5 pounds. And, but a beautiful, and there was a Sasha holding the hand on the baby and the baby's face was so serene. And now the baby's a cool kid. But the mommy died. And with, I think, the liver cancer, but then Sandy then had to make sure that the baby wasn't too traumatized. by experiencing the mommy, so it was a holy shit experience.
Is she still out here near Santa Rosa?
Where you had to be grandma to everyone, and everyone was so strong. They fought off the cancer. They did this. They wanted the baby at all costs or whatever. But you somehow make sure that you kept the human element in the baby by your presence, that they respected. But everyone was going through their own sorrows and exploring. So then they all went through a holy shit experience. So the mommy passed away. So it's not, and then I think that Sasha then has been caring for the child, and the child is pretty cool and hip kid, little musician also at 5, I think. And then your kid is doing music there too. And then Eric's boy in San Francisco is a musician also at 10 years old or so, or 12. So there's a bunch of cool kids coming at her, and then there's a bunch of older kids that are also, my daughter died of the virus.
I tuned in.
Yeah, in August, yeah, in that time period. So that kind of opened up a whole hidden world, that was how popular she was and what. So you see, it was the same kind of work that our lives have been, the same kind of conversations. But yet you couldn't tell her what to do.
We've done human.
That was also, then her mother died pretty quickly after that from Brooklyn. Then they were in Miami. So whether she let it go or not, I don't know. But then that took me, that was the whole Brooklyn experience, then went away.
Yeah.
In other words, the passing away of both of them was the ending of that period just before we left for India, and so you see then that the life that came out of the experience, when I came back to them after doctor the first time, and I knocked on the door and she had a Jamaican boyfriend, and so you see what I thought was still waiting for me there. Life went on without me, but that also went. But it was friendly and shifted. And so then but the relationships that came out of the sadhana were qualitatively different than those that came out the karma in the past.
Right.
So the relationship that came out of them with Jenny didn't have a history. It came more out of the experience together, and so then most of us, the relationships that came out of the sadhana had a different element to it. And the children were somehow born free in it.
Yeah.
So I'm experiencing that. You must be experiencing elements of that also. You still into it?
Same.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I mean, definitely. These little beings are amazing. Amazing. I just
So what do you
laugh.
think
I mean,
then,
I'm like a little kid with them, so I play Barbies.
What do you think then, Kai? It's been a weird conversation today.
Lovely. I was, different subject. I was reflecting on you said your memory of Urja, if she passed. So I was having all my sweet memories of Urja.
Yeah. But then Urja may be surprised that I remembered her that way. But she remembered immediately that she bought the New York Times and it was the wrong day in Amsterdam. What else? Didn't you do something with Alan Gordon or something like that?
Oh,
No, so Urja came through into our life from a different circumstance to some degree. She came out of Rajneesh. Now, the folks who came out of Rajneesh, there was 2 Rajneeshes. There was the Indian Rajneesh that was there when we were there, and there was, and then there was the Rajneesh that became later on, especially when the Germans came.
Yeah.
Then they turned Rajneesh into then coming to the States and doing also. That was a whole different Rajneesh. But Rajneesh in the beginning stage, when you knew him in India, had a hipness to it, you know, and about a new way of living, a new way of seeing things. But then he was banned, I think, from India. And then when he came to the States, but before that, he was a teacher of Krishnamurti. But then when you went to see Krishnamurti, you would see all these Rajneeshis then making fun of Krishnamurti by making love in front of him while he was giving a talk and stuff like that. So they were, and then he named a lake in Oregon, Krishnamurti Lake or something. So then when he was a teacher in Bombay of Krishnamurti, he then became a ridiculer of Krishnamurti. Was probably going through girlfriend troubles of his own. You know, so I think the problem that they all had was girlfriends.
The Indian
That
guys.
no matter how spiritual they were, girlfriends somehow came into the picture. And whether they were dancing girlfriends or laughing girlfriends or screw you girlfriends or whatever, but somehow the girlfriend thing escaped all knowledge, all what to do, that they were fools for love in some way.
It took them all down.
Well, it took them down because, because they acted on it. Like in the Ashtanga Yoga, where they say, "Okay, are you telling me that the downward dog was invented so the guy can dry hump you?" I say, what kind of religious guy is he that he has to dry hump you secretly like that? And I say, well, hold it. When you think of it as before, when it was happening, you thought of it as an affectionate caring. Then 10 years or 20 years later, you find out this old geezer was really dry humping you. I say that takes away all the spirituality, that somehow you were free and able to share on that level around that kind of feeling. And I say, and what kind of schmucky scene is like God comes in to dry hump you?
Right.
But dry humping certainly will change the picture. If all of a sudden, if Jesus says to you, and then verily I say unto you, and then all of a sudden he starts dry humping you.
Right.
Then you say, Jesus, I'll catch you later, okay?
Right.
Poor God. And you see how
That's what everybody said. I'll catch you later.
I'll catch you later. You see, then
Catch
they
you
say,
later, man.
the poor
Grow up.
schmuck, you see how hung up he is. And they say, well, can it be? Is it possible that this guy was invented the downward dog? They don't do the downward dog.
Poses. I hate that term.
Okay. So then they say, look, there's always written into every script is his downfall.
Yeah.
So then where dry humping was not dry humping, but an affectional holding and sharing. And then it becomes an old geezer who was dry humping you. You see all the magic leaves.
Yeah.
And you see the motive that runs through the story.
Well, at least Bal Yogi was open. He didn't hide it.
No,
He was open.
His beauty was that he was an abandoned boy.
Yep. He was a
They
feral
made a career-
child living in
They
the
made
forest.
a career of abandoning children by the Ganges. The boy who became Guru Bai or down the road was a kid that was found on the Ganges, where the gurus used to pray for babies to
Right.
be delivered because people would abandon their children there. It was holy to be left by the Ganges. So that you see that there is a whole career in India of abandoning kids or kids with no names or orphans, or that they have to have 20 children. So they let go of kids, they make beggars of other kids, which was normal. So when you find out, it's kind of cheesy that they'll break a kid's legs in order to be a better beggar and stuff like that. And,
Get it.
so
Yeah.
remember,
I've read the book.
I remember on that Lakshman Jula Bridge there, there was all these.
Oh, it's
What are
not there anymore, but that's what I remember is going through the leper colony. And I would try to run through
I
it.
started to
fast
hang
as I
out with the
could.
leper colony, and they turned out to be regular schmoes like everybody, like in Queens. And even the guys who were laying on the thorns and everything, they were just regular people.
Right.
Doing anything.
Share a beady with them. They'll lay on their thorns and smoke a beady and chitty chat.
So you see what was
and
normal
chat
for
with
them.
people.
what was normal for them, you entered into weird cultures and
Mhm.
weird situations. What was normal for them was weird, but it was culturally acceptable. You know?
But then what was weird is it became normal for us.
That we could navigate through these different worlds, but still the philosophy was that we were in it, but not of it.
Mm.
So then you weren't in India, you had a teacher and you had a love affair. And so that allowed you then to have, so then you see that Sitaram is still looking for a girlfriend to share the space with him or whatever.
Mhm.
Hanging out with Naga Babas was not such fun.
Right.
They're real ball busters, those Naga Babas. But
You know.
the Naga women were nice. Chewy, I don't know if you remember Chewy, but she went back there. But Chewy then married Shanti and they moved to Rome. And then she left Shanti and married a French fellow. And they were
Hmm.
dealing art from Nagaland. And she's a
Mhm.
force. Her name is Chewy.
Huh.
And so everyone who came out of our weird experience there, and
They've all created something.
where all there was so many relationships that came out of that time when we were together hanging out broke in India, and those
Mhm.
relationships became marriages and realities and expressions or art, you know. And if you look and you say, how the hell did that happen? And yet you see that it just came out of the magic, the weirdness out of the sadhana,
Mhm.
and it had a little bit of the energy in it that took into the story. So it didn't have literal works or jobs or any longer like that. Somehow it had more of a creative lifestyle. So I feel that the energy, it has been in retrospect, if you're from the front seat looking at the movie of our life, you would have an insight into something that's hidden because it's still trying to continue. But you would see chance, luck, all accidents, all these things being so remarkably into like
Mhm.
a quilt, crazy quilt. Yeah.
Right. I always say it's the tapestry. It looks so beautiful, but then when you turn it over, you see all the knots and the stuff that we had to go through to make
You
it.
have to, there's you and you. There's you, the journey, and there's you, the person, the literal karma
went
and
through
dharma correspondingly happen.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's why I say an accidental reading of something or seeing something or hearing about the cancer of my father 60 years earlier sends me back as a kid into that room. And then I
Mhm.
see I never met the guy. I only met
Right.
the story of the guy. And so then you see in meeting the guy, he turns your life into mystery rather than history.
Yeah.
You see
It,
that your
it's
mother,
all a mystery. I mean, my dad turned out to be a pedophile. And but then one day, many, many years after India, I was walking with him and he said, because I would never take my children to see him because of his propensity. So he never saw his grandchildren. And we were walking and he said, well, he said, when I was 7 years old, my brother dressed me as a woman, and had men come and sodomize me. And since then, I've never known whether I am really a man or not. And so from that tragedy
but
of 7
basically
years old,
you see that these lame people, these lame machine people
I
have a
know.
story like
It's
that.
like,
I said, I thought you were so lame, middle class, dopey people, and now you're talking to me that you're stuffing animals and you're sleeping with
oh, I
cats or
know.
whatever.
It's like, go
And they,
figure.
but you walk in on a scene and they say, look, I'll catch you later. And they
Right.
say,
I
well,
always would leave. But every time I went, there was a drama. And I said, okay, namaste. I'm back to India. I
but
thought
there
I
is
could
also
come back
something
to
in our
it.
circumstance
Could
where
never come
homie
back.
don't play that. You've heard it before. You've heard that mantra before, homie don't play that. You've heard
Yeah.
that before, Jai or Kai? That homie don't play that, meaning that they're yours to care for, not yours to, okay. So the
Right.
one thing that happens when you come out of the journey is that you're not leaving a karmic experience behind.
Yeah, you're kind of free.
So
You're
there
free
was a
from it.
difference
Just
between
namaste.
sensuality. With the grandchild, it's sensuality, not sexuality.
Mhm. Right.
When it literalizes around the psyche, poor me, and this is what happened, and I repeat what's happening. you understand that you were instinctively protecting the children anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because the person then was given to that. But you also understand that somehow when they made a move on the story, there was a kind of break with the grace.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I felt I could forgive. I mean, he never abused me, but my grandfather did. And nobody protected me. It was all kind of under the carpet, but I forgave them all. It's just
No,
part of
we
the.
know someone who may hear us, but his father is doing time in what's that big prison over there in California, in San Francisco? Not Sing Sing. No.
Oh, San Quentin?
San Quentin, yeah. I think he's doing 10 years or so. For having had, they found that one of the daughters, when she was getting married, had counseling, and she revealed that her father, with the other daughters, had kind of, and yet they had kind of religious family and this and that. But then you saw also some elements where the father would have thought that it was love and this and protection or whatever, that story. I think he's teaching out of San Quentin there. And then our friend, who then had elements like that, where we said, homie, don't play that. That somehow if you know us in relationship, there's no trip.
Yeah.
And so there have been a few challenges like that when it's where somehow the love affairs are happening naturally, not through any slickness or trickery or anything like that. Because that is the essential violation, is that somehow you're caring for the child.
Right. I think you protect even more their innocence because you're regaining your own innocence, and so innocence.
You're not protecting something literally. Look, I think that you're conscious of the difference between sensuality and sexuality. Sensuality is not a possessive. The sexuality becomes a possessive. When it's a possessive, there is no longer a love shared, it's a psychological state.
Right.
So grandfather coming in under a love where the child is trusting then does crazy old man.
Right.
Under the disguise of grandfather. He's disguised as grandpa, but he did whack out.
Right.
Because there wasn't,
he didn't
have to take the person out, and he didn't have to woo them, and they had instant access. Okay. So in that, there's a care that you're protecting. So there's the difference between sensuality and sexuality. Sensuality is caring for the grace, but you understand your own hang-ups then possess the story. So then the child, when your hang-up owns the story, the child becomes a possessive. When it's coming from the sadhana, the child is that you're caring for something. You're caring for its innocence.
Yeah.
So you understood the difference between innocence and that was there in sensuality, and the cleverness that happens in sexuality, where you have to play someone and work someone and do all that. But you see that there's an instantaneousness in the sensuality of attraction that has a purity to it.
Right.
So so that somehow when so you saw that somehow they were still stuck in themselves. So it becomes then there's a psychological rationale for it. But you say, hey, Papa, you're full of shit. You've been pulling this number all the fucking time. If you want to be with my sweet kids, stop the shit. Say it. I swear I will stop the shit. Say it. I swear I will stop the shit. We'll put a sock on you. We'll tie you up.
Put a sock on it.
How fucking lame do you want to be? An old geezer like you messing around with kids? Do you really want to be remembered as that lame? Because I will kick your ass. if you lame yourself out now. So if you want to know my sweet kids, you got to be sweet old man yourself. What a conversation that would be. Impossible conversation. But
Oh
very
no, I've
necessary.
had it with my dad, and that's why I
You
couldn't
see, it's
say
a
things
necessary
like,
conversation. Don't mess with the kids.
don't mess.
Yeah.
No mas.
I think that conversation we're hip to your moves,
No mas.
you know, and it's no more that you a poor thing who was once a kid and they did this to you and then, okay, I understand. But now you are here. We are free people. If you're looking out for the kids, it's purely because there's a dopey love affair for them. No trip. So can we ask for this period? And that's what I was saying with Sitaram and the others. And at one point is that this is a phase where there's no trips. Forget the Naga Babas and the, I know when I got hung up with the Naga Babas, how much of a bulbus they were all the time. You know, always trying to make a buck, always trying to scam something, always trying to do something. So the legend of the Naga Babas and the literal hanging out with the Naga Babas, it was something different. So I say, look, we're all on this journey together and we've all visited some very weird scenes. When you hang out with everyone, they turn out to be people like everyone else. So we've had relationships that have allowed us a kind of expression, creative life. And much of it through accidents or a certain circumstance happening. But there is every now and then a heartfelt conversation. If you can have it in the lifetime, where it's not just a mother jumper, but it is affectionately that you free the story from the literalness. Because you see that the person had to live in a kind of suppression for most of their life in order to keep it together.
Right.
Then you're kind of releasing the story, if you can.
Right.
So it's not a calculating conversation, but it is a hangout conversation about where we are now, and a kind of trust that comes out of that. But what do you think, Kai? Is that possible? But I can say, oh, Papa, homie, don't play that. Remember that clown that used to hit you on the head with a little rubber bat or something like that when you did something?
It seems like when then they have a propensity for that. I don't know if they can hear that.
I think if you said it straight up, they would have to hear it. Because it's not hearing
I
it
think
literally.
what they hear is the reason why
Look,
the separation.
it is not a flaw. It is not a flaw in the person. It is probably survival equipment that has probably always existed. So if you read history, you see how weird it has been. So if you see a guy who's been suppressing himself to do father and grandfather and had to hide himself, and okay, so at that one point, then you see he has a secret life. So all of a sudden, if you meet an innocent, then that's released or whatever. But then we say, well, hold it. From the perspective, that's the norm in the world. It's not abnormal. They'll explain it. And you say, they'll explain it, and they say, okay, that sexuality, sensuality is always a puzzle. And then if you read anyone's book, all the brilliant people, you see that they were always hung up about relationships and love affairs and longings and yearnings through themselves. Okay. So then they say, okay, but then there is a space where the person is not your possessive. So in their mind's eye, they kind of own the child also, and in their mind's eye, they're also looking out for the child in some weird way. Okay. But then you come into a picture and you see the difference between a habit and a possessive and a care. And you see that you have changed that situation in yourself where normally your kids may be very leery of you for the life that you've lived and the love affairs that you've had and the easiness of the love affairs, and even now that you can then go to India and have a love affair. And then you realize you came from a weird scene, hidden in a hidden life of these people. And what your mother and father's conversation must have been like, who the hell knows if they were making love or seeing each other or had that affection or whatever. So let's say it's normal for people then to not have the feeling and continue the form, and they live in a kind of pain all the time. But then you also see you come from a different place where it's not a psychological world, where the child is not your possessive, but is you're caring for something. So then you see that normally you would have had what your own kids may have done with you, protect their kids from you, from your whack-outness, or from your craziness, or from whatever. And you see then that you would take a stance to protect your kids from their parents, their grandparents. And you see to some extent that you would do the same thing, that you're protecting the kids from their grandparents to some degree, because it's kind of a possessive with the grandparents, that it's a kind of ownership or something.
It's always been a little questionable.
And you say, well, what's the protection for then? And then they say, because they're nuts.
Yeah.
Because they're nuts. They think that I'm an obstacle to something that they want to do. And they, okay. And they, so then that they're nuts. They're making the children into their little trip or something like that. And our kids are born free to find their love, to be Meshuggah, to do their thing, but that their life is spiritual. They don't have to, just by its nature, I'm hanging for that. Now I understand how many thousand names they're going to call me, but I know their move. And I'll also understand that given all these movements like that, there's sexual hang-ups that run through the story.
Yes.
That they have to hide, that they have to have a hidden life all the time. And when you see the hidden life, you start to see it becomes pretty nasty. It takes advantage of innocence. So it says, Jesus wants you to do that. You're right. Jesus, I'll catch you later. Like you're speaking for Jesus for me, right? Well, I speak to Jesus like that every day. And Jesus ain't saying anything that you're saying.
It's a very weird interpretation.
Jesus says, Jesus comes in there and says, take my pants off. I said, look, I'll catch you later. Said, but Jesus told me. And I said, okay, I understand. I'll catch you later, bro. So let's say it has to be true in some weird way. And truth doesn't mean like literal truth. It means a kind of poetical truth. So it's sensual, not sexual. You're caring for the grace in the child. And so the protection is not a literal protection. The protection is against the innocence being too disturbed to some extent. Yeah. But you're not having the innocence be stupidity. The innocence is a factor of how they'll live their life.
And it's purity. I mean, it's the very first niyam is purity. Purity. Okay. And that's what the children are.
So then you understand that purity is not for sale. There's one aspect of the human experience that is not for sale. Right. But you also understand in the regular world, everything is for sale. So the old geezer can wave a candy bar with a motive. But somehow our relationships are without that motive of the self over the other. So when one chooses the self and sends the other to hell, bullshit. So somehow, but your presence won't allow it anyway.
No.
Now, I don't know if you have to have a fire extinguisher there or a BB gun or a machete or something like that. But somehow you broke the thread from your own experience.
I think it's just standing the gap and just saying that it's going to end here. For a long time, I stood as colleagues.
Well, the relationship of family is no longer psychological.
Right.
So the relationship of family is caring for something. So it's
qualitatively different. It was very easy when I came back from India just to separate. I mean, it's like they were parents, but I had no longer a connection with them. I was still respectful. I still called my father daddy, but my father would never see my children. And it was just understood. It had nothing to do with love. It had to do with reality and duty.
Well, let's say in recognizing it, you've transformed. Because then you're saying that daddy truly is daddy now, not some crazy guy pretending to be daddy. And daddy just meant that he's caring for.
Right, you gave me life, and I respect that.
Okay, but then he was just a regular person who had to hide much of his life in order to.
And I understood. I understood.
So then you see that he had friends with people that he may have been close with, just like you. And and they may have had private lives.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Shared something. Okay. What do you say, Kai? Can the story be free?
Yes.
Well, I say, look, when we had a whole crew of people with AIDS that were living here at one point, you saw that Gregory went out to San Francisco to Castro district to get the AIDS as part of his career move. Not so much that it was a fault, but that somehow he went out of his way to get the very thing that most people were trying to avoid. But he introduced that as part of his resume.
Right.
Where then he was a teacher of that. But then you see that inherently, once you had it, there was an inherent spreading of it. So I've heard these kind of horror stories also where from what they told me where that he passed on this other guy, went into the mall and found some guy who's with his kids, and then he had sex with the guy while the kids were waiting, and he knew he had AIDS. And I said, "You're coming into my scene with that shtick." Wow. And I said, "Homie, don't play that." And they said, "Why?" I understand that if you have AIDS, you're going to pass it. But I understood also, then he was calling me to ask me, should he call the guy's wife to let him know that he may have AIDS? And I said, you mother jumper.
Yeah.
You give the guy AIDS while his kids are waiting outside like that, and you pass it on to him. And you know, you could recognize that the guy was a closet gay. And now you're going to be a nice guy and advise the wife, hey, you know, that may have happened, and blow their whole family apart. So I said, look, man, can you understand that you are being karmically controlled here? If you want me, I'm not, once you have the AIDS, it dominates your thinking. And it dominates your being. So you have a sneaky life with the AIDS all the time where you're having conversations with it. Should I do this? Should I do that? So then you understand that there are also others who are attracted, who have a kind of death wish, who have a broken heart or whatever. And so it's not so stupid. You're making moves. And the AIDS have given you an insight into a happening that you would have just walked past. But then you see that other people who have that experience to some degree have this secret life together. And so part of it, but from us, part of it is innocence. That somehow you know something that the other doesn't know. And that's the way of the world out there, making a buck off them, doing this off them. But that ain't the world of the journey. Right. You don't make a buck off your kids. No. You understand? You're not doing, a buck may come, but you're not, okay. So somehow there is an element of trust in it that's not so laid out, but it is laid out when it's broken. It doesn't tell you what to do, but when you do something that is pure ego and the other doesn't even exist, then they're just an object.
Yeah.
So somehow, by your presence, you're kind of ensuring a whole examination of sensuality in the family and how it must have played out. And what you did in India you must have shifted the whole plane by going to India, where you changed it from being karmic and playing out a similar element. Because love relationships was your medium.
Right.
And so
Correct.
you may have revealed a secret psychic life or physical life in your parents where they were not in love anymore or whatever, but they were keeping it together. And they may have each had a secret life. Whether that's just whacking it alone or whether that's meeting with friends around this or that, but somehow they kept it together. Somehow they kept the logical life together, but they had to have a secret life in order to do it. So when you would find out their secret life, it would be a cheesy life. What would be secret for them was because it was cheesy once it was real. Like, oh, you're kidding me, man. Okay. But you see, it was a secret life that allowed them to keep a story together, or to keep a private feeling together. But then that feeling becomes distorted. But you also see elements that have slipped out into your own story in some way, where somehow like that, you can be in love with someone and that you can share it without even saying, hey, baby, haven't I met you someplace before? You didn't even need to be romanced to some degree, but that somehow there was a look or a feeling or shared, and then it was just normal for you to share that spirit together. So you kind of normalize something that people for 100 years, no matter how much they tried, they couldn't make that happen. And you just walk in the door and all of a sudden you're a dancer, you're a lover, you're this, you're that.
I was young.
So there is a time though for me where there is no trip. There is a period of time where there's no longer a trip around it, the survival trip. But at this point, this part of the life then is coming from a different place, coming from the sadhana. Meaning that if you choose to do it, you're doing it not because you are psychologically dominated or historically dominated, but because it's a cool thing from your perspective. So I think that it's a different phase. Maybe the virus has interrupted the karma and turned everything through the computer anyway. So it may have changed things. Where it's coming from the integrity is part of the expression of friendship. So it's not laid out as rules. But then you see when an incident interrupts the friendship. So you see that the friendship was an energy shared. And that when the energy, it's not the issue that something happened, but it interrupted the energy shared or the trust. When the trust shifts, the form starts to collapse.
Correct.
And it may be just discovery of a stupid thing like that. You say, so let's say you discover what you kind of intuited with your dad. You discover. And there's a holy shit moment. You see, you could see all the moments and everything through time and this and that. You see, but once it's kind of revealed that way, how it ran through the story. But once it's revealed, you see that everyone took it as normal. Normalized itself until an issue happens and you say, holy shit, we live with this. This scene is missing. This thing is missing a soulful, heartfelt conversation.
Yeah, it just happened one time. I came back from India and I walked in and there's this big conversation. It was my brother's niece that my dad molested. I had no knowledge about my dad. I only knew my grandfather. And then I thought, namaste, I'm out. I went back to India. I mean, it's like, there's a point where you don't really want to associate your spirit, that's blood, but I'm not associating myself. I'm not ready So that took another couple of years
So
in
when
India.
you've lived the sadhana, when you've lived the sadhana and you're meeting the circumstance, you're meeting it in relationship to the sadhana.
It was,
So
I
let's
was
say that
really,
somehow you had a trust with the guru.
Mhm.
And then 30 years later, you find out that it was dry humping, not downward dog or something like that. And I say,
no, that
but then
wasn't
I
mine,
say, but
but
at that point, they say, when you discover it was dry humping, you discover a very naive, dopey person because America was so hip at that time.
Mhm.
Everybody was engaged in sex with each other and hanging out with each other. You would make love in that moment and just meeting the person that day, and it was part of the thing. You met in Goa, this and that. This was the children of God would teach their kids to flirt. Flirting was part of the shtick. You understand? Then they say, how do you make this sect survive? They say, we teach the kids to go out and flirt with people. And flirtation then becomes members and friends and situations or whatever. So they say, yeah, but they can get in trouble and there's some crazy dudes out there or whatever. And it does. I say, for one point, it was pure. But then another point, it became a trip.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you see that there were instant love affairs that came out of nothing, just meeting in Goa or having this scene or doing yoga together or whatever. And so somehow there was something that allowed you to be naive.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then in retrospect, you see the move and you see the structure and you see this and that. But you see that the naive allowed realities to take place.
Mhm.
So that you can go into a ashram in India from a boy who was found in the woods, and you can then be as from an American girl from Queens, all of a sudden you're a serving tea and this and that. You.
Mhm.
So I walk in there delivering sneakers or something with those shoes, those red shoes, and I see
Probably
this
has them.
dancing girls or whatever. Okay.
I said he probably still has those.
Okay, so then I walk into a story where there's a couple of California girls doing the Egyptian. You know, remember that dance, the Egyptian, where you're
I
gopis.
don't remember that, but I'm sure we did.
No, I walk into a gopi situation, not girls from Queens or girls from Pennsylvania
We're probably in the circle
or
dancing.
guys. There were a short guy who was found in the woods, but all of a sudden I was asked to drop off a pair of sneakers to this guy, and I climb the fence, and I go in there, and this is normal.
Mhm.
And I say,
Is
where
it
are you? And I said, there's a short guy who's laying down on his side like Buddha, and there's a couple of girls from California, and I think one from Queens, doing some kind of gopi thing. I said, well, what's the philosophy? And I said, it seems the philosophy is to do this. And then I meet a Mangalananda, so it means a happy face. Happy face, Saraswati. Okay. And then I know his name is Gil Levy, and he's a Jewish guy from San Francisco, the Bay Area. Okay.
Right.
So then I know all these guys as Jewish guys from California or from Brooklyn or from this place or that place. But now there's Swami Dapalana, Swami Dupadita, and we're all enmeshed in a fantasy together.
Mhm. It's a
That
lila.
we couldn't pull off if we were in Queens or in Pennsylvania, but somehow we're able to wear lungis and this and that and do this shit. Okay. But then there are moments when you're going to wake up and realize that it's bullshit.
Mhm.
And so then
That's
there's
what
a
doctor said to me.
moment.
So
Then there's a
make
soul searching
sure-
moment.
Mhm.
Then you start to see that there is soul searching in the exploration.
Right. So when I
But
first met
somehow
Doctor,
in doing,
told me
and
that
somehow
I
in
would.
doing that, you've changed your life. Because then when you go back into the real world, you're bringing that experience with you.
Mhm.
And so somehow, so you see around the difference between sensuality and sexuality is hidden in the energy. And sensuality is that, like Shiva or Shakti said, that you're in love when you make love. In love meant that you had no trip, no duality. So that when you made love, you were in your being, in the shared experience. So sensuality didn't exactly mean sexuality. It may mean sexuality. But it meant a love affair where the bodies of beings were entwined, where they were one being. A sexuality that comes out of the sensual experience doesn't have the history in it that the karma does.
Mhm.
So you see that a baby that would have come out of Bal Yogi would have been pretty weird for you, no?
Mhm.
What do you think? And then
Yeah,
you go
no.
back to you go
He
back to
does have
California.
he does have a daughter, but it came out of an Indian woman. And she's taking care
Yeah,
of him
no,
now.
I feel that. And also we're hearing a bit from doctors' kids. Was
Uh-huh.
one son is in Bollywood, but first he was pissed off about things
Yeah.
for a while because. But then I think it's coming around, and I think he's really identified that with doctor. But it would be hard to say, hey, look, we want to make. It's like describing Jesus. If you knew Jesus, we were all hanging out together. So it was a hanging out situation. It wasn't so much a guru situation with this or that. It was
Mhm.
guru and friendship. And so it was the hanging out together that allowed the expressions to take place. It didn't have an organized thing. And so I felt also that Doctor found his voice when he got to Woodstock or the Bronx, and they were just girlfriends and just all laying in the same room together, and it was easy, and there was a trust, exactly what that dry humping situation was, but it wasn't dry. It was people who were on different levels,
Mhm.
but then hanging out together. It was a kind of mosh pit of friendship or conversation. Everyone went to their own life after that, but everyone shared this weird experience. I feel it was that shared experience that changed the plane. That
I think
you
it was a
were in that
decompression.
ashram and you thought it was normal.
Yeah.
But
The
I
doctor
understand
for me
that
was
being in that ashram shifted the plane of your life.
yeah, but the doctor was a decompression. So the India was very compressed, very, very, very strong sadhana, strong practice, living in the jungle, eating nothing. When the doctor was like the place of it, like a decompression chamber. So I wouldn't be torn
Yeah, but
apart.
you also, but you didn't have the same relationship with doctor that the.
No. But he
So
wasn't
you didn't have a
meant
love.
to
You
be
didn't
that.
have a love relation. You didn't have a love relationship with
But
doctor.
he wasn't meant to be that. For me, he told me in the very beginning when I
Look,
went to India that
look,
I
when
would
we
find.
meet, when I meet the doctor,
Yeah.
I meet a guy who was arguing with his family.
Right.
You understand? And it was
Yeah.
the lamest, weirdest scene after leaving Rishikesh and going down there in despair. But everything was starting to become lame for me. Ram Dass, they were just Jewish guys, so it was starting to collapse for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then someone mentioned the doctor, Shanti, and so then when I went there, he's having a fight with his wife, and the
Right.
kid, the very kid who's calling now, stole a couple of hundred rupees from me from the wallet. And doctor says, when I was missing the money, doctor said, "Oh, it must have been my son. My wife sends the kids sometimes to check and see if there's any money." So they were living in separate parts of the house. So then doctor was being visited by these hippies, which changed the scene. So then he stopped being a doctor, and he was not a family man. And then the community started, with Rosa Bubani, started to take her clothes off all the time and yell at young kids that they were uptight. And so the village came and started to throw rocks at Doctor. So then Doctor and whoever was there had to flee to Old Delhi. So then from Old Delhi, everyone was broke there. It was his father's old house where his brother was living with his family there. And then but they were all a group of weird people, boys and girls, hanging out together there, broke in a story. And they wrote Darshan Yoga, and someone who was a teacher from Cornell gave them a ticket. And Evan, who worked for that kind of a Hindu society or something, that's how they met Evan and Martha and so on. They were in the Ivy League schools. So Evan went to America to create a scene for Doctor to come.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a weird scene of hanging out in the Bronx with all these guys that were sadhus or whatever, and then in Woodstock. And so, but it came out of that. America freed the story.
Mm-hmm.
America
Yeah.
freed an Indian story around sensuality, where the women were friends and lovers and hanging out together, and the hanging out made love and this, and it was normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mhm.
normalized the situation. But to me, I think that experience transformed then the Doctor experience. But in going back to Goa, some people contributed money where so many of us then were to rendezvous in Goa. Doctor had no home to go to after Goa, So then Goa changed the situation somewhat, because then Martha came into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went together there. Well, I brought Martha backed up to Delhi from Goa. And then it was there at then once we got up there, that there were relationships that developed.
Mm-hmm.
So then I met Jenny, who was coming out of New Zealand, and we, with no money at all or whatever, we then on Lebanon Airlines or something, we came to America, and as if it was normal. And so it all came out of the schmutz of friendship, and then inviting Doctor to show up, and a meeting, as you say, on the Russian River. Then at that time we had a retreat, and then it kicked off from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then folks chipped
I
in and
remember
bought
a lunch with Shel Silverstein. Do you remember were you there for the lunch?
Shel Silverstein was very dear to me. Kai met
Yeah.
Shel Silverstein there.
He came, we cooked and sat on the floor, and
Well, he thought Doctor was pretty weird, though, because of the stuff he was eating. Shel hitchhiked around. He hitchhiked there from that time.
Mhm.
But Shel was pretty nice. So we became very close in, where was that? Key West again, Kai?
Mhm.
I had a retreat there, and he was there. I've got some nice pictures of him.
That's when I met Gregory too. He was.
I think I got to go and answer this call.
Okay, I think we have to go also. So has this been too weird?
No.
Discussing a kind of almost a movie life, as the everyday life that we've had more resembles a movie. And we're talking like it's normal. And we're talking
Yeah.
as if you had a father who did this. Holy shit.
Yeah.
What kind of, homie, don't play that. And they say, why? I say, because togetherness kind of requires a kind of common consciousness of, hey, baby, do you want to do this thing? So somehow it's not a move anymore.
Yeah.
It's a creative act. You okay, Urja? Or was it too
Yes.
weird?
No. It's life.
Okay. I'll speak to you soon. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow night if you can make it. Okay?
Thank you.
I'll
Thank you,
see you
Dennis.
then.
Okay.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Mhm.